Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Pirates. Obtain the Big Mom talent at the beginning. Chapter 41. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Talk about it. How many pirate groups are active in this sea area? Entering the office belonging to the top executive of the G20 branch, Luo Shu leaned on the comfortable chair, put his feet on the desk, and tapped the armrests of the chair rhythmically with his fingers while asking in a deep voice. Since he saw the worried expressions on the faces of those generals from time to time, and he roughly guessed what these people were thinking. There must be troublesome pirates living in the sea area under his control. As the top officer of this branch, he will not watch those pirates act recklessly, he will naturally step forward and wipe out them all. Quote. Report to Major General Luo Shu. There are 6 pirate groups in total. Most of them offer bounties of tens of millions of belly. The strongest one is the Crazy Lion Pirates. Their captain is an animal type, cat fruit, lion form ability user, and he also masters armed color hockey. Currently, the reward is 120 million Baileys. You guys, look at me, I look at you. Finally, the oldest branch major general spoke. His voice was very low and mixed with unconfidence. He even mentioned the Crazy Lion Pirates at the end. At that moment, my whole body couldn't help but tremble. What a waste. As a navy, but you are so afraid of pirates, have your courage been eaten by dogs? Sir, I propose to remove this guy from his official position, so as not to embarrass our navy. As soon as the branch major general finished speaking, Drake, who was standing next to Luo Shu, couldn't help but cursed him. He didn't expect that the naval general in his hometown would be such trash, and he was even more ashamed of it. It's not scary to be unable to defeat the pirates, because you don't have that strength, but you shouldn't feel fear just by mentioning it. How can a timid person like you deserve the rank of Major General of the branch? From today on, all of you will have your official positions demoted 1 level, and the 2 vacant branch Major General positions will be filled by Drake and Thor. Did you hear that clearly? Luo Shu's face turned ugly. What he looked down upon the most was the navy, who was afraid of pirates, so he issued his second order after coming to this branch. Yes, Major General Luo Shu. Although these generals were a little unwilling, they didn't dare to speak out. Just the aura emanating from Luo Shu's body made them breathless, let alone openly resisting military orders. That was simply asking for death. Snort. Thor, you and Drake are divided into 2 groups. You are given 1 month to completely clean up the sea area controlled by our branch and wipe out all the pirate groups. I don't want to see a single survivor. Especially those bullshit Crazy Lion Pirates, remember to let them die miserably. Looking at the generals who were unwilling but did not dare to express their feelings, Luo Shu snorted heavily, and then gave instructions to his 2 closest subordinates. His first goal now is to kill himself first. Manage the territory well, then plan other things. Yes, sir, please rest assured. I won't let you down. Drake and Thor immediately came to Luo Shu and saluted and said that they have been promoted to a higher level now. Of course, they need to show off, and those pirates are their achievements. After saying that, they walked out. They arrived at the office and prepared to mobilize people to complete the tasks assigned to them by Luo Shu. From now on, you can live in the G20 branch with peace of mind. You don't need to consider promotions in official positions. Each one is worse than the other. The Navy can support you and it is considered to be the most benevolent one. However, you must do a good job as a clerk, otherwise you will be kicked out at any time. After the 2 people left, Luo Shu found that these people were still standing there stupidly. He shouted at them again, fully demonstrating the prototype of the tyrant. At the same time, somewhere in the unknown sea area of the North Sea, a huge land is floating on the sea, and most of the buildings are decorated with black flags with the number 66, which represents the powerful force of Germa 66, or a country. If you look carefully, this land is made up of individual sea slug, the transformed warhouse is spliced together, the scene is very spectacular. And in the middle, there is a luxurious palace, just like the residence of kings in other countries. No matter where you look, you will have a feeling of luxury. Father, news just came that Luo Shu, the naval genius you mentioned, has arrived at the G20 branch. At this time, a girl wearing a skirt, although she was still young, but already had a good figure, with loose purple hair, walked into the palace with light steps, bypassed the layers of guards, and came to the hall, said respectfully to the middle-aged man sitting on the throne. She is Vinsmoke Reiju. Even though she is only a teenager now, she has already begun to help her father, the current Wen Smoke. The leader of the Smoke family, the supreme commander of Germa 66, Vinsmoke Gaji has taken care of the matter. Is it already here? This man, who is called the most powerful genius in the history of the Navy, was sent to Beihai to serve. That guy from the Warring States period probably wanted the other party to quickly gain merit. Inform your 3 younger brothers to try not to cause trouble in that sea area. Vinsmoke Gazi pondered for a moment and then said that as a super family that once ruled Beihai, the intelligence system under his command is quite smart. He dare not talk about other places, but when it comes to Beihai, if there is any trouble, he could know it immediately. And as the head of a big force, how could he not have heard of the name Luo Shu, who was at the height of his power in the Navy? In his opinion, the other party was too troublesome, and it was best not to deal with it if there is a conflict. Who knows what measures the Navy headquarters will take? Anyway, they have a lot of business in Germa. At worst, they will not use it to exploit the war wealth in the sea area under Luo Shu's jurisdiction. Father, early this morning, Ig, Niji, and Yuji went to the Loka Kingdom, claiming to help the other party destroy the revolutionary army, but it seemed that they were eyeing the money of that small country. Vinsmoke Reiju raised her special eyebrows and said nervously to her father. Boom, quick, tell them to come back immediately. After listening to his daughter's report, Gaji said after patting the armrest of the throne hard. He is really a little scared now. The king of that small country will report the matter to the G20 branch. Although his 3 sons, due to his naturally modified body, his strength far exceeds that of his peers, but he can never be the opponent of that monster Luo Shu. If his son is caught by the other party, although he will not be killed, if the matter is reported, the world government will probably cancel their status as a member country, and Germa 66 will be in a difficult situation. In fact, the world government has always been there, monitoring the power of Germa 66 overtly and covertly. After all, its ambitions are indeed not small. Although the other party cannot have the ability to unify the North Sea again, as the person in power, naturally it will not give the other party a little bit chance. The reason why it is not eliminated is because there is no need. In other words, the current Germa 66 is not even qualified to be taken seriously by the world government. Anyway, the other party has to hand over a large amount of heavenly gold every year in exchange for the illusory as a member country. Why not do this to the world government? At the same time, they also turn a blind eye to Germa 66's war fortune, but don't bring this matter to the surface, otherwise the world government will definitely take action. There are so many affiliated countries under its command. If everyone were like Germa 66, wouldn't the world be in chaos? Precisely because he understood the pros and cons of these things, Gaji urgently asked Reiju to summon his 3 sons to come back as soon as possible. Don't let the Navy get hold of them. If they were caught, it would probably happen. Big strip. In Gaji's heart, restoring the once glorious status of the Vinsmoke family is more important than anything else, even at the expense of his own life or that of his children. Otherwise, in the original work, how could they contact the Big Mom pirates after being stripped of their status as a member nation by the world government? It's not just that you want to use the other party's strength to achieve your own goals. But it's a pity that he forgot who he is, or that the power under his command is simply incomparable with that of the other party. He also has no chance to take advantage of Charlotte Lingling. The end result of seeking skin from a tiger will only be miserable, not to mention that compared with Sha Lingling, Lot Lingling, he is at most a kitten. After a while, Reiju dialed the phone number that was used to contact IG alone, and told the other party what her father Gaji had said. On the other side, IG was on the battlefield, wearing a combat uniform. He frowned and stuffed the phone bug into his arms. Looking at the defeated soldiers of the Loka Kingdom, he really didn't want to leave so inexplicably, but he could not resist his father's order. What's wrong? Did your father give an order? Yongji, who had green hair standing next to him, asked in a calm voice after seeing the face of his nominal brother. And Niji also cast his gaze over at this time, with a trace of doubt in his eyes. They the 3 brothers have been successfully transformed. They have had no affection since birth, and are not even afraid of death. It can be said that they are inhumane. Father has just issued an order for us to return to the Germa 66 headquarters as soon as possible. Give up and capture the Loka kingdom. After IG thought for a moment, a few signs of struggle flashed across his young face, and he said to his two younger brothers. What? Our victory is right in front of us. As long as these soldiers are eliminated, the entire Loka kingdom's money will belong to us. Why is Father so anxious to let us go back? Forget it, since it is the Father's order, we just need to obey it. Give the notice and prepare to evacuate. Yongji was very unwilling to do this, but Niji made a choice. They had been instilled in them since childhood that they could not disobey Gaji's orders, so they would abide by what Gaji said no matter what time. In this way, originally the Germa soldiers who were about to pursue the victory immediately stopped what they were doing after receiving the orders from the three young masters and quickly ran towards the war house parked on the shore. However, although they were fast, their formation was there is no chaos, and they are still ready to enter combat at any time. This shows how strong the combat awareness of these soldiers of Germa 66 is. Have the demons left? Oh my god, very good. We finally saved our homeland, but unfortunately my son died in this war. Germa 66, they will definitely be punished, and the incompetent navy. We have sent them a call for help, but it has not come yet. They do not deserve the name of justice. If I can get a powerful devil fruit, I will definitely eradicate all the forces of Germa 66 and completely eliminate this cancer living in the North Sea. I don't know what happened to the king and those ministers. They didn't die in the war. If they were willing to spend a lot of money, we wouldn't have to be attacked by the evil army. That's right, how many of us died in this battle was not because our king was a miser and would rather die than hand over his money to Germa 66, but he and the ministers only knew how to hide behind and let us go up and die. Quote. After all Germa's soldiers, led by IG, Niji, and Yongji, evacuated the Loka kingdom, those soldiers who survived breathed a heavy sigh, and then gathered together to talk privately. Although most people hate the brutal behavior of Germa 66, some people are so resentful that they have reached the top of the country. They choose to become soldiers just to let their families live a good life, not to protect their families and the country at all. And some people actually complained about the navy. They believed that the navy arrived too slowly, and they were probably afraid of Germa 66, so they deliberately delayed the arrival. But now, Luo Shu, who had just received the notice, had already arrived here on a warship with part of the navy from the G20 branch. It had only been less than half an hour since he received the news. Even if he abandoned everyone and used thunder, even if the fruit flies, it cannot arrive so quickly. Who would have thought that the other country would evacuate early and give up the plan to plunder the Loka kingdom, and as a result, the soldiers of the other country would have bad thoughts about their navy. Your Majesty the King, come out quickly, those hateful guys have already evacuated. Yes, our Loka kingdom is safe. Quote. At this time, in the palace at the center of the island where the Loka kingdom is located, several old people who were not young but richly dressed came to a door that looked like a secret room and shouted loudly inside. Their status can be called the nobles of this country. Each of them holds great power. Of course, they will not charge into battle like those soldiers. Now that Germa has retreated, they all stand up and come. Report the situation to your king. Click, click, click. There was a sound of gears turning, and a fat middle-aged man wearing a golden robe and a crown walked out from behind a black door. He was King Fidir of the Kingdom of Loka, and in Gear when Ma 66 invaded his country, as the king of a country, he was the first to hide. Behind the black door was the entire country's treasury, which contained a large amount of money. He could have donated part of it to ease the relationship between their country and Germa 66. But he didn't have that choice. As a miser, he would not give his money to anyone else even if he died. That Germa army has already left. That's great. What is the national loss? Fidir twisted his fat body, glanced around first, then regained his previous dignity, frowned and asked the ministers. He almost hated Germa in his heart now, but his country's the strength is there, all you can do is be incompetent and furious, and there is no chance to retaliate against the opponent. Your Majesty the King, more than half of our soldiers from the Kingdom of Loka were lost in this war, and most of the remaining ones were injured, and many were even disabled. It will take a long time to replenish the original strength. Time. one of the most senior ministers said after he stepped forward and saluted. The other officials lowered their heads deeply, and no one looked at Fidir. Who knows if the other party would react after hearing the news? Anger them. What did you say? Waste. They are all a bunch of losers. No matter how powerful Germa's army is, how can it be possible to wipe out so many soldiers from our kingdom of Loka in a short period of time? They must be cowardly and afraid of death and did not use their full strength to fight the enemy. Right, that's it. As expected, Fidir was immediately furious and cursed, and even used his pig brain to come up with an extremely ridiculous reason to comfort himself. In his opinion, the soldiers of his country are very powerful and should not be so unbearable. One blow, at worst, could drag him to the navy, but the fact before him was like a knife piercing his heart, making him feel a sharp pain. Your Majesty the King, you were right, it must be the passive response of those soldiers that caused this war to end in failure. Yes, I suggest that 2 years of military expenses be deducted from those soldiers who survive. His Majesty the King is really wise and powerful. He immediately thought of the reason for this defeat, which really makes us admire him. Let me tell you, even the medical expenses of those injured soldiers should not be paid. Let them learn from this lesson and see if they dare not fight against the enemy next time. Quote. For a time, all the officials echoed, saying that what their king said was right. In fact, even though they knew very well that their country's soldiers were very weak, they were unwilling to admit it. To sum it up in one sentence, they were living in a dream. This king will adopt your suggestions. Correct. Is the navy coming? Fidir nodded proudly and said, but in the end he changed the topic and suddenly turned the topic to the navy. To report to His Majesty the King, the navy has not arrived yet, and Germa 66 did not know why he left in a hurry. But we are safe now. The old minister saluted again. He was still wondering why Germa 66 left suddenly, but he still couldn't figure it out. When our kingdom of Loka faced the invasion of the evil army, the navy responded so slowly. It would be great if we were a member of the world government. For this matter, it would be enough for the navy to come and take the blame for us. Fidir's face also turned ugly. It's not that he hasn't considered getting the status of a member of the world government, but he is reluctant to hand over so much heavenly gold every year, otherwise someone will definitely reimburse him for this loss. Your Majesty the King, we are not too far from the G20 branch of the Navy, and we do not need to obtain world government membership. As long as there is a pirate invasion, you can go to the Navy for help. The old minister thought for a moment and could only follow the temper of his own king. He did not dare to say anything that would make the other party uncomfortable. He could live to such an old age and had already used his skills of observing words and emotions. Yes, you are right. Let's go see those soldiers first. After all, they can be regarded as defending the country, even though they were defeated in the end. Fidir pinched his chin that seemed to be oozing out oil and water, and after pretending to think for a while, he said that he had already thought about it. He would first take care of his soldiers, and then deduct their military expenses. As for who dares to resist him rule, then he can only use strong methods to destroy it. After about 2 hours, Luo Shu's warship arrived at the Loka kingdom. He had been moving at full speed all the way, but before he arrived here, Luo Shu had already used his knowledge and domineering power to sense when it came to the situation in this country. He knew that he was late, or that he had been tricked. From what he heard from the people in the Loka kingdom, Germa's army had left long ago. Maybe the other party received some news as soon as he set off from the G20 branch, and then retreated at full speed. Do you not want to conflict with me, or do you want to play a cat and mouse game? Luo Shu, who was standing on the deck, slowly raised the corners of his mouth, thinking secretly in his heart. These navies are so incompetent. Our country was beaten to pieces before they arrived here. If those demons had not retreated, I am afraid that the kingdom of Loka would have been destroyed. We have long said that the navy is not reliable at all. If we place our hopes on them, we will not even know how we will die. Forget it, those are the army of evil. What will happen even if they come? Can you fight with the opponent? I'm afraid the entire army may be wiped out by then. Just when Luo Shu was about to issue an order to leave the Luoka kingdom, civilians who looked very embarrassed were standing on the shore, and soldiers with some blood stains on their bodies were carrying corpses. After discovering Luo Shu's warship, they began to discuss. Their voices were loud, and their words were very harsh. The soldiers of the Navy G20 branch behind Luo Shu frowned, and even looked angry, but they did not refute. The army of evil, their name is well known in Beihai, and they are indeed no match for those people, but it's good to know this kind of thing in your heart. Wouldn't it be embarrassing to say it in front of them? Ha 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 ha, what an interesting conclusion. You guys wait for me here. You are not allowed to leave the warship without my order. If anyone dares to provoke, shoot and kill them. I'm going to meet the king of this country and the ministers around him. Luo Shu held his forehead with one hand and let out a deep laugh. He ignored the people who had just spoken rudely and instead gave orders to the soldiers behind him. Then, he rose into the air and quickly rushed towards the center of the island. Your Majesty the King, the chief of the Navy G20 branch is here. He wants to see you. Snap, snap, snap. Ah, he is just the king of a small and weak country, how can he be so arrogant? I came here in person and didn't come out to greet you. I'm afraid you really have had enough. A few minutes later, a soldier in armor ran into the palace in a panic and reported to Fidir, who was sitting on the throne. But before he could finish speaking, Luo Shu was already taking firm steps, slowly walked in, and glanced at the people in the palace with disdain, and said with a sneer. Just now, when he wanted to enter the palace, he was stopped by a group of soldiers with little strength. Luo Shu, who was already in a bad mood after revealing his identity and having to be searched by the other party, immediately killed them all without any mercy, leaving only one person who ran in first to report. Soldiers, others, had lost their lives in a matter of seconds. How dare you, a brat, speak to our king like this? Come on, arrest this maniac pretending to be a navy man immediately. Before Fidir could speak, the most senior minister stood next to him and yelled with an angry face. But unfortunately, not a single soldier came in until a few minutes later, and the atmosphere also changed at this time. It was extremely embarrassing, and neither party spoke anymore. Luo Shu picked up a cup from the table on the side and filled it with wine. He looked at the ministers who were sweating on their foreheads with interest, and Fidir, who was sitting on the throne and shaking unnaturally. Gudong, Gudong, why don't you scream? If you were louder, maybe. Someone is here to save you. After drinking all the wine in the cup, Luo Shu said to the minister playfully. He was sure that even if these people screamed their throats, no soldiers would come to rescue them in a short time. Because of the soldiers responsible for guarding the palace, except for the one who is now scared to death, he has killed all the others. In addition, no one else can come to the palace, so no one will come to ruin the atmosphere. Well, Major General, if you have anything to say, please tell me. We are not pirates, nor are we a revolutionary army. As a navy, you shouldn't attack me, right? Yes, we live in the same sea and should help each other. Right. If the G20 branch has any difficulties in military expenditures, we will be very willing to fund it. Quote. Under the leadership of one of the ministers, others also began to compliment Luo Shu. They were joking. Now their lives are in the hands of the other party. They are not the misers of Fidir. They can risk their lives for money. Hi, Navy, don't be arrogant. I am the king of the Luoka kingdom. If you dare to kill me, if this news spreads, I am afraid that your official position will not be guaranteed. Do you think you are sure to kill everyone in the Luoka kingdom? I don't believe you have that strength. As long as one person escapes, you will fall into a place of eternal destruction, and there will no longer be a place for you in the navy. Fiddle wiped the sweat from his forehead and threatened Luo Shu. Until now, he has inexplicable confidence, and he even regards himself as the god of Luoka kingdom. It seems that he is missing. This kingdom will disappear. Do any of you have phone bugs to contact Germa 66? Luo Shu didn't look at Fidir at all, as if he was nothing. Instead, he looked at the ministers. He believed that the country in the North Sea should have more or less contact with Germa 66. I have their phone bugs here. A group of pirates came to the country before, and we hired the evil army of Germa 66. But I didn't expect that in just a short time, we would be targeted by the other party, and we would almost be destroyed. The veteran who scolded Luo Shu at first thought that Luo Shu had let them go and shifted his target to Germa 66, so he took out the phone bug in his arms, walked towards Luo Shu, and said also started to complain. Polu, Polu, Polu. What? You changed your mind? Are you going to hand over your money to us, Germa 66, to beg for our forgiveness? I tell you it's too late. You were lucky this time. Father has important matters to deal with from us. Don't think that Germa will let you go. Luo Shu dialed the phone number in front of everyone, and then, an unruly voice sounded. The speaker was none other than Vinsmoke IG, who was on his way back to Germa's headquarters. He was still very confused about what happened before, and couldn't understand why his father suddenly asked them to evacuate. So after answering the phone call, he immediately made harsh words, saying that he and others would go to the Loka Kingdom in the near future. Little brat of the Vinsmoke family, listen, I am Luo Shu, the top officer of the G20 branch of the Navy. Go back and tell Vinsmoke Gaji that you dare to send people to invade the country in the sea area under my jurisdiction. I won't give a. If you are satisfied with the explanation, try to leave Beihai. Click, Luo Shu said to Vinsmoke IG while looking at the people in the palace, and then directly crushed the phone bug to pieces. Aha, poof, from today on, you are the king of the Loka Kingdom. I don't want to hear people from your country say bad things about our navy behind our backs. Otherwise, the world is so big and the disappearance of a country will not cause much turmoil. Is that right? Just when everyone breathed a sigh of relief, a bolt of lightning flashed out in an instant, piercing the head of Fidir who was sitting on the throne. Then, Luo Shu said to the oldest minister with a calm expression, no. When they had an answer, they turned around and left the palace. Gudong, Gudong, Gudong. Listening to the sounds of the officials behind him swallowing, Luo Shu smiled without looking back. He was not afraid that those people would dare to disobey his orders, nor was he worried that someone would leak what happened today. He was sure that these people would pretend that nothing had happened today, and would give the king a random way of death, and would not even spare his family, and then they would appease the civilians and restore the country to its former peace. As for going against Luo Shu, they are not that stupid, even if Luo Shu left the navy because of this. Will they have a good life? Furthermore, there are some things that people won't believe just because you say them. It was announced to the outside world that Fidir was killed by people hiding in the kingdom of Loka, Germa. And his wife and children were the ones who cooperated with Germa, whose purpose was to kill the king and usurp the throne. Their thoughts are so sinister and their crimes deserve death. They will be publicly executed later. As for me being the king, I will not remove you from your official positions, but you must know that some things are best forgotten. Otherwise, beware of trouble coming from your mouth. The palace was quiet for a long time, and finally it was the veteran who broke the silence. Although his words were full of loopholes, there was no problem in lying to the common people. Those people didn't care at all who became the king. They only thought about it. If they would live a better life under another king, then these civilians would be very supportive. Luo Shu, who returned to the warship, set off back to the G20 branch. At the same time, he was also thinking how to deal with Germa 66. As for letting the other party go so easily and turning a blind eye to the matter, Luo Shu said that was impossible. If this situation occurred outside the sea area under his jurisdiction, he might not intervene. But the matter of the Loka Kingdom is before him. If he does nothing, the other party will probably think that he is afraid, and it is likely to get worse. There is a saying that it is like kicking the nose in the face. He will not give Germa 66 that opportunity. At night, the palace in the center of Germa's headquarters was still brightly lit. The three brothers Ig, Niji, and Yongji who had returned here stood in a row below, reporting to Gaji who was sitting on the throne. About the kingdom of Loka. I want you to come back this time because I don't want the new top officer of the Navy's G20 branch to get a hold of you. Don't go to that sea area to accept missions in the future. After Gaji heard what his three sons said, he said with a serious face, his voice was extremely firm, and there was an unquestionable tone in it. Yes, father. By the way, father. And one more thing. Just as we were returning to the Germa headquarters, the top officer of the Navy's G20 branch seemed to have gone to the Loka Kingdom and contacted me using a phone bug. Let me tell you, if I don't give him a satisfactory explanation for this matter, he would not let it go, and said that because of this, our Germa 66 would not be able to survive in the North Sea. As soon as Niji and Yongji finished speaking, IG suddenly thought of the phone bug he had connected with before, so he conveyed all Luo Shu's words to his father. He still remembers this now. At that time, he was so angry that if it weren't for the order issued by Vince Mokgazi, he would even want to take people back to kill him. Teach Luo Shu a hard lesson and let him know what kind of existence Germa 66 is. We will stop updating novels on this site, move to our new site, web links. That Luo Shu asked me to give him an explanation. He is so young and energetic. No matter how famous he is in the Navy headquarters, would he dare to openly confront me, a member of the world government? Furthermore, this time he did not catch us, Germa, and we are not afraid at all even if we go to the world government. Okay, you can go down and rest, remember what I said. As long as we don't go to that sea area to cause trouble, let that kid dance slowly. He can't always serve in Beihai. Gaji was stunned for a moment, and then said angrily. Over the years, except for the behemoth world government, who once threatened him, he has never heard anyone dare to talk to him like this. But he didn't. Luo Shu's brainless order to attack the G20 branch was given in a hot-headed manner. Luo Shu only regarded it as intimidating him and did not take it to heart. But Reiju, who had been silent all this time, frowned secretly, not knowing why. She always had an uneasy feeling, but when she thought about it carefully, she couldn't figure out what was going on. Time passed slowly like this. 1 month later, no matter whether it was wandering in the sea areas under the jurisdiction of the entire G20 branch, or the pirate groups that have lived here for a long time, all faced a disaster. Under the attack of Thor and Drake, a total of 10 pirate groups, large and small, were wiped out, and no one was left behind. After the news spread, the civilians living in this sea area all applauded and admired Luo Shu, the highest officer of the Navy's G20 branch, whom they had never met before. He also gave Luo Shu a title, called Hero of the North Sea. The Navy members in the G20 branch also presented military salutes to Drake and Thor when they returned. It was a heartfelt tribute. With admiration, all this was seen by Luo Shu. He just smiled and did not give any big rewards to the two of them. In his opinion, this was really normal. With the strength of the two of them, even pirates living in the New World can be dealt with, let alone these garbage. If even this pirate group cannot be wiped out, Luo Shu may not be able to control the anger in his heart and kill these two men with his own hands. Die. Well done, you two. You have lived up to my trust. Go and have a good rest. But don't forget to practice. In the office, Luo Shu was leaning on the chair. He looked at Derek and Thor, who looked a little tired after being away from home for a month. He couldn't help but praise them, but in the end he didn't forget to give them some instructions. Yes, sir. Is there anything else? After the two of them saluted Luo Shu together, they did not leave. Instead, they stood there blankly, as if they had something to say. Luo Shu asked with doubts on his face. Sir, when we were annihilating the crazy lion pirates this time, we found a very strange girl on the other side's ship, and she even caused us a lot of trouble. However, she was not very strong, but her fruit power was very weird, and in the end the important thing is that there was no bounty on her. After we caught her, we locked her up with a sea tower stone. We thought her ability might be useful to you, sir, so we didn't kill her. Please forgive us for making arbitrary decisions. After the two looked at each other, Derek slowly said, Oh, tell me what kind of ability it is. Although Luo Shu had already gained some insights at this time, he still wanted to confirm that if it was the ability he had in mind, then he would really value the girl that Drake mentioned. Throughout the world of One Piece, demons' fruit abilities are all kinds of weird, but they can be called weird. Luo Shu doesn't have many eyesight. First of all, the first one is Boya Hancock's superhuman type sweet fruit, Bruno's superhuman type Menman fruit, Pa Dong. The animal type, phantom beast species, the raccoon form, or Key's superhuman type, karma fruit, etc. But the weirdest ones are Bakara's superhuman type, lucky fruit ability in the original work, and Sugar's superhuman childlike fruit abilities. Those abilities mentioned before may seem a bit useless when faced with people who are stronger than themselves. However, if these two abilities are accidentally touched, they can only be used. Announce that your end will be miserable. Unless you have a certain level of domineering knowledge, and maybe you can resist it, like Katakori's ability to see the short-term future, or listen to all things in nature, otherwise the possibility of recruiting is very high. After analysis by Thor and I, her ability can take away other people's luck, and it can also make the person who is recruited very unlucky. The girl used this weird ability to make us suffer a lot, but the strength is indeed too poor. We seized the opportunity and were easily defeated. However, during this period, except for Thor and I who had seen her, not even the Navy soldiers knew of her existence, and the pirates who knew her had already gone to hell, so we took the initiative to keep her here. I just want her ability to accomplish some goals for you, sir. Drake touched the new. He even wanted to kill her quickly many times, but thinking about the other party's ability, he finally discussed it with Thor and decided to keep the girl for now, and at least report the matter to his parents. Bring her to see me. The corners of Luo Shu's mouth gradually turned up. He really didn't expect that he would meet this woman during this trip to Beihai. She should be about the same age as him now, but he can stay by his side and train her well. She can definitely become his in the future. Powerful help. You go back and rest first. 10 minutes later, the two of them came in with a girl who was handcuffed by a sea tower stone chain. Luo Shu looked at Bakara with red hair, his eyes flashed, and then he ordered Drake and Thor leave and prepare to talk alone with the girl he likes. Yes, sir, you also need to be careful about her abilities. The two looked at each other, saluted together, and then turned and left the office. The system opens the other party's panel. Ding, the panel is opening. Name, Bakara, special talent, top luck domineering. None, physical skills, beginner, sword skills, not beginner. Ability, Superman system, lucky fruit not awakened. Comprehensive strength, C+. Superman, lucky fruit user. Very good ability. It's a pity to become a pirate. What's your name? The scene was quiet for a few minutes. After checking the opponent's panel, Luo Shu took the lead in breaking the deadlock. He looked at Bakara, who had his head bowed deeply, and said to him with a smile. My name is Bakara. Do you want me to stay with you? The most powerful genius in the history of the Navy, or in other words, the hero of the North Sea, Rear Admiral Luo Shu. Bakara slowly raised her head and looked directly at Luo Shu with a pair of beautiful eyes. She had seen newspapers about Luo Shu before, so she recognized him at a glance after seeing him. Moreover, she was very smart. Luo Shu's words analyzed his purpose. You know me well, so I won't beat around the bush. Your abilities are very helpful to me. If you are willing to become my subordinate, from today on, you will be the captain of the naval branch. You will help me handle some documents on weekdays, that is, just do your job as a secretary, and I will teach you how to practice. After all, no matter how powerful the fruit's power is, you still have to have the life to use it. Although the lucky fruit is weird, what's the use if you can't even touch the enemy? Luo Shu said with admiration. He was indeed very interested in this kind of woman. Although in this world, one's own strength is the most important, one must also be equipped with a certain brain, otherwise he would die without knowing how. Do I have any other choice? But I hope you can do me a favor. You are a colonel in this branch. A few years ago, he connived at pirates and destroyed my hometown. Click. Since you have become my subordinate, you are now the colonel of the branch. Use your mind or other methods to avenge yourself. I will turn a blind eye to this. If you even seize this opportunity, if you don't stop, it will only disappoint me. Here's your badge, go back and get some decent clothes and get to work. Before Bakara finished speaking, Luo Shu had already come to her side and used the key to open the sea tower stone chain that was holding her. Looking at Bakara, who was still just a girl, he couldn't help but touch her delicate breasts. Face said. Yes, he did not say anything to directly help Bakara get revenge, but left the colonel to Bakara to deal with it on his own. He really didn't care about such a small matter. Quote. Bakara, who was being teased by Luo Shu, didn't say anything. Instead, she stared at Luo Shu with a red face. When had she ever been treated like this before? At the same time, she secretly wondered if her decision was right. Go for it. Get familiar with the G20 branch. Remember that you have a good relationship with Thor and Drake. They are all my confidants. Maybe some unpleasant things happened between you a few days ago, but I don't want you to what conflicts will arise from this. Luo Shu retracted his hand and said meaningfully to Bakara that he didn't know how Drake and Thor caught Bakara, and he didn't want to know how badly they were fooled by Bakara's ability. In a word, as his subordinates, you are not allowed to have strange thoughts. If there is anything, just bring it to the surface. If they are plotting against each other behind the scenes, and he discovers it, the consequences will be serious. A week later, Luo Shu's life has become even more nourishing since he got Baccarat as his secretary. In addition to practicing every day, he lives a life of flirting with beautiful girls. Now he no longer has to manage those things, which makes him extremely happy. I have a headache with all kinds of files. Little sister, guess who I am? On this day, Luo Shu, who had just finished practicing, opened the door of his office and found Baccarat, wearing a black uniform, standing there with her back to him and wiping her desk carefully. This made Luo Shu there was a bad taste in his heart. He had no choice but to underestimate the temptation of Baccarat when he was a girl. Now the other party's figure was already very hot. For a moment, Luo Shu walked over slowly and covered the other party's eyes with his hands. Pretending to have a rough voice, he said, "My sir, please stop making trouble, okay?" Bacala, who was pranked, said with some helplessness that even if she didn't see and hear Sibachi and couldn't hear Luo Shu's voice, she was sure that the person who blindfolded her must be Luo Shu. If it were anyone else, first of all, they won't do this. In addition, even Thor and Drake have to knock on the door first if they want to enter this office. The only one who can come in quietly and do such a thing to himself is himself. Sir. Very smart, I reward you by pouring me a glass of wine. Luo Shu, who let go of Bacala, his face returned to its usual calmness, and he gave instructions to his secretary. By the way, you made that colonel's family so miserable, aren't you afraid that I will think you are cruel, which will affect your image in my heart? A few minutes later, Luo Shu leaned back on the chair, drinking wine and enjoying Baccarat massaging his shoulders behind him, while teasing him in a strange voice. It was only now that he felt like he was superior to others. Before, when he was in the headquarters, although he was respected by many Navy, he did not live a comfortable life for a few days. He told himself more than once in his heart that he must work hard to practice, and when he completes his ambition in the future, he must experience the feeling of lying drunk on the lap of a beautiful woman and awakening to take over the world. You don't think I'm cruel. In fact, I think you are more suitable to be a pirate. Baccarat first pouted and said something angrily, and then sighed. After getting to know each other for a week, she found that Luo Shu didn't have any of the justice that a navy should possess. It wasn't that Luo Shu didn't have the temperament in this aspect, but that the other party's character, in her words, didn't exist at all. He should be in the navy, but instead he is made to be a pirate. Oh, you dare to question me, your boss, aren't you afraid that I will execute you on the spot when I'm angry? Listening to Baccarat's words, Luo Shu hugged her in his arms and said with feigned anger. It's not that he didn't think about something happening with Baccarat, it's just that for him, this kind of thing will be settled naturally, and he won't do it. Will use force to pressure others, or use strong methods, so that he will feel that he is incompetent. Sir, don't do this. Realizing that the posture between herself and Luo Shu was a bit inelegant, Baccarat said with a red face, and at the same time, her body struggled slightly. After all, she and Luo Shu had only known each other for a few days. Even if she had some affection for him, she wouldn't let her show up directly. In the original work, although she seems to be extremely open-minded and can deal with all kinds of gamblers and becomes Tezzolo's confidant, she has always been very conservative in her heart. In fact, you have to know that whether it is a pirate or a navy, it is just a position. Everyone has different ideas and chooses a different camp. And I chose to join the navy in order to achieve the goal in my heart. You will understand it later. After putting down Bacala, Luo Shu stroked the other person's hair, sniffed it with his nose, and said in a calm voice. If he became a pirate, it would be many times more difficult for him to fulfill his hidden ambition. Once you are labeled as a thief, the most difficult thing is to get recognition from others. Even if you use your strength to overwhelm everything in the future, your reputation will still not be very good. Think about it, how can a pirate rule the world, even if he doesn't care about other people? People's words will be embarrassing after all. Even if an order is issued that no one can mention history, isn't that the same as the current world government? Luo Shu is not just a fool setting up a memorial arch, but wants to really do this the king of the world, and will be supported by the world, so joining the navy is the best choice. In his eyes, no matter which pirate he is the representative of evil, cruel, cold-blooded, including Whitebeard, Roger. They are all pirates. Once they land on any island, they will immediately arouse the fear and vigilance of the local residents. This is a situation that will never change. Even pirates talk about benevolence and righteousness. Luo Shu thinks this is nonsense, benevolence and righteousness. These two words are not worthy of being uttered from the mouth of a thief. There are so many pirates in the world, and 99% of them leave a bad impression on civilians. Even if there are individual pirate groups, I keep trying to refresh this concept, but it is still a drop in the bucket. For example, Edward Newgate, the Whitebeard, loves his sons very much. Even though those pirates are not his biological sons, he can call them a loving father, but in the hearts of civilians, he is more terrifying than a monster. This concept cannot be changed unless Whitebeard dies. Buckle, buckle, come in, Major General Luo Shu. Just now, the king of the Kingdom of Qs, a member of the world government, asked us for help, claiming that a revolutionary army had entered their country and was going to launch a coup. He hoped that we could send people to deal with it as soon as possible. Before Baccarat could say anything else, there was a knock on the door. Then, a communications soldier walked in. He saluted Luo Shu first, and then started a report. The Revolutionary Army. Notify Drake to prepare warships and let Thor guard the branch. This time I want to take action personally to see if these revolutionary troops are as terrifying as the rumors. Originally, Luo Shu thought there was some kind of pirate invasion and was going to send 2 of his confidants to deal with it, but who would have thought that it was the Revolutionary Army who was causing trouble? After traveling to the world of One Piece for so long, he had never seen the Revolutionary Army. Naturally, he didn't want to miss this opportunity, so he decided to take the people there himself. The Q's kingdom in the North Sea is considered to be a relatively large country in the sea areas under Luo Shu's jurisdiction. Both its military strength and civilians are far superior to the Loka kingdom that was previously invaded by Germa 66. Moreover, this country is also one of the countries that joins the world government, and every year it hands over a large amount of heavenly gold, so that if something happens to its country, the navy and the world government can help. At this time, Kuzi Island, the island where the king of the Kuzi kingdom lived, had a large number of ships gathered on its shore. Standing on them were civilians holding various weapons in their hands, as if he was going to fight the soldiers gathered in the distance. Maybe they had been severely exploited in the past, so there was no fear in their eyes. If Luo Shu saw this scene, he might have to admire the brainwashing ability of those revolutionary troops. They are really not that powerful. Captain Haku, we acted privately this time. We are afraid we will be punished when we return to the headquarters. Yes, even if we really overthrow the regime of the Ku's country, I'm afraid we won't get any rewards. If we wait for the leader to know about this, we may be left with nothing to eat. Quote. On a boat in the middle, several combatants of the Revolutionary Army complained to the yellow-skinned Murloc who stood there without saying a word. Originally, they were just passing by here, but their captain Haku couldn't stand coups. Because of the miserable life of the common people, they began to instigate a civil uprising, preparing to overthrow the rule of King Kuz in one go. But this incident was not known to the top leaders of the Revolutionary Army at all, which means that they acted without authorization without even reporting. Obviously, this does not comply with the military regulations of the Revolutionary Army. Stop arguing. If anything goes wrong, I am willing to take all the responsibility. You have also seen how pitiful those people are. I believe that even the leader will definitely approve of me doing this if he knows. Haku, wearing martial arts uniform, exposed his strong chest. Looking at the civilians who were about to fight with the soldiers, he said without looking back. Of course he understood what these companions said, and he never thought about it, but he really couldn't bear to see the civilians of Ku's country living in dire straits. He could only take risks to make this revolution a success. Why are there so many revolutionary troops? They all seem to be civilians in our country. The Revolutionary Army must have incited the civil uprising. They want us to kill each other. They are worthy of being called the most evil force by the world government. How dare you try to overthrow His Majesty the King's rule? Brothers, when they land on the island, you don't need to hold back. You must kill these white-eyed wolves. That's right, these pickpockets are no longer the citizens we want to protect. They are all accomplices of evil forces now. We just need to treat them as pirates. The soldiers who were already on standby on Coos Island found that most of the boats on the shore were civilians from their own countries. They were even more angry, and their hatred for the Revolutionary Army was also filled up. They did not expect that those who needed to be protected by them in the past now stand up and pick up weapons to fight them desperately. This is clearly out of goodwill. As for the life of the other party, that is not what they should consider. Some things only depend on the results, and the process has nothing to do with it. Unimportant. Defeat those soldiers. Kill the foolish king of Coos. Go, kill them. You will starve to death sooner or later anyway. Fight them. With a few shouts, tens of thousands of civilians jumped from the ships and charged towards the military formation in the distance. There were only a few real revolutionary troops among them, and the rest were from the Coos kingdom. Civilians, this is the power of change of will. Although these people were originally dissatisfied with the status quo, no one dared to jump out and rebel. However, after being brainwashed by revolutionary ideas, each one of them became fearless and fearless of death, believing that they and others were not worthy of death. They should be treated unfairly. And for the sake of a new life, or for their descendants to live a good life, they all looked down upon life and death. In the palace in the center of the island, a group of ministers from the Coos kingdom were ferrying back and forth. As he walked, even King Coos, who was sitting on the throne, seemed a little flustered and kept wiping the sweat from his forehead. He had recently received news that more than tens of thousands of civilians had rebelled. Even though he was frightened, he quickly sent someone to contact the navy that had jurisdiction over this area of the sea, and even called the world government for help. In fact, he wanted people from the world government to put some pressure on the navy so that it could send people to rescue him quickly. Kerr's state. In the past, he often laughed at the heads of countries whose regimes were overthrown, but now when it was his turn, he behaved very badly. Your Majesty the King, you don't need to be nervous. We have reported the news to the world government and have already sent a request for help to the G20 branch. Major General Luo Shu, known as the hero of the North Sea, is bringing people here. His strength is enough to suppress those rebellions. Yes, Your Majesty, as long as the soldiers of our country hold the other side back and wait for the arrival of Major General Luo Shu, the Coos country can successfully overcome this difficulty. Your Majesty, I think you are usually too kind to those untouchables. After this incident is over, taxes should be increased. Anyone with different ideas should be sentenced to death to see if they dare to rebel in the future. Quote. Several ministers with more vicious eyes, after seeing the performance of their king, immediately stepped forward to salute and said, but most of them offered words of comfort, and only a few people made some mindless remarks. I live frugally and always think about those guys, but what I get in exchange is betrayal. It's really abominable. I hope that Major General Luo Shu can arrive soon. After the incident is over, I must thank him properly. King Coos said a few words with hatred at first, and then said with a melancholy look. Now he only thinks that Luo Shu can arrive quickly and suppress the rebellion, otherwise he will never be at ease. As for Luo Shu's ability, he quite recognized it. After all, he was able to wipe out all the pirates in the waters under the jurisdiction of the G20 branch in a short period of time. It was obvious that the other party was a very capable naval general. At this moment, on the shore of Coos Island, 2 waves of people had been killed. Under the wave of charges, a large number of corpses appeared, or the remaining parts of their arms were broken, and the wailing sounds were endless. Polu, 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 I am Luo Shu. At the same time, Luo Shu, who was rushing towards Coos Island, heard the phone bug in his arms ringing. After taking it out, he found that it was actually the phone bug specifically for contacting the warring states. Boy Luo Shu, you should be on your way to Coos Island now. The Coos Kingdom is a member of the world government, so the Revolutionary Army must not be allowed to succeed. This time your enemies are no better than pirates, and you are likely to attack those. The brainwashed civilians should not be merciful when they take action. Warring State's voice with a hint of exhortation came from the phone bug. He originally didn't want to disturb Luo Shu, but he thought that although the other party was very outstanding, if he encountered a large number of civilians who had been brainwashed by the Revolutionary Army, he might do something like this. What an unwise thing, so he decided to vaccinate Luo Shu in advance. Now that this matter has been brought to the Five Old Stars, it can be said that many eyes are staring at the Ku's kingdom. If Luo Shu, this approach is not recognized by those big bosses, I am afraid it will be difficult to return to the Navy headquarters in the future, let alone a promotion. Thank you, Marshal of the Warring States period, but please rest assured, I will not let go of those evil forces. Luo Shu smiled contemptuously, but he also thanked Warring States, because even without Warring States' reminder, he would not have let those rebels go. In his eyes, they were no longer ordinary people. He is a minion of the Revolutionary Army, so he must be wiped out, otherwise the sea area under his command will be in chaos. As long as you understand what I mean, do it beautifully. Seng Guo, who was in the marshal's office at the Navy headquarters, said with great satisfaction. Then he hung up the phone and started processing the documents on the table. He believed that Luo Shu would do a good job. Warring States, do you really want to do that? There are tens of thousands of civilians. They only rioted because they were brutally exploited by King Kuz. This is not a crime worthy of death. I think that the king should be executed and replaced with a benevolent ruler. This is the fundamental solution. And Garp, who was sitting on the sofa, stopped what he was doing and shouted angrily at Sengoku. Cap, I'm afraid you have forgotten the existence of the Revolutionary Army. Please clarify your position. Without the Revolutionary Army to fan the flames, how could those civilians want to rebel? Even if they are really exploited and live miserable lives, what does this have to do with you? Every country has its own rules. Don't impose your own rules on others. Warring States raised his head, and the boss with his eyes widened under the toad mirror yelled at Garp. Sometimes he really admired Garp's rough nerves and unrealistic ideas. Where does this world come from? It's fair to say that, at least, he has never discovered anything in his long life. Snort. Garp snorted heavily, and then stopped talking. He just sat there silently. Even his favorite senbei was not in the mood to eat. He knew that there was nothing he could do. First of all, the Navy headquarters has a relationship with Beihai, a very long distance away. Secondly, if he helps those civilians execute the King of Kuz, he will become a traitor to the Navy, and his reputation as a hero will disappear instantly. This is not in line with his will. Therefore, in addition to, she had no other choice but to be sulky. At most, she could just pray for those civilians in her heart. Crane, who was sitting on the other side dealing with documents, just shook her head helplessly. She knew what Garp was thinking, but her point of view is the same as that of the Warring States period. The Navy and the Revolutionary Army are in opposition. No matter in terms of stance or style, she will not support the Revolutionary Army. As for the idea that everyone is equal, that is just a joke. Some people have never. He was born extremely noble, and he could easily obtain a life that others could not live in their entire lives. How could it be fair? Sir, we need to take action against those civilians. Nearly an hour later, the warship appeared on the sea 1,000 meters away from Cut's Island. Drake, standing behind Luo Shu, asked his parents very respectfully after discovering the situation on the island. So much so that even Baccarat, who accompanied Luo Shu out, cast her eyes over. She wanted to know what kind of decision this man would make. What civilians? Drake, tell me which one of them is a civilian. Have you ever seen civilians take up arms and attack the soldiers of the country who once protected them? Remember, those people in front of you are all accomplices of evil forces, and they are also unforgivable existences. Luo Shu slowly turned around, looked directly at Derek, and spoke word by word. Yes, sir. Drake's face straightened, and after saluting Luo Shu, he said loudly that he was not a compassionate person to begin with, let alone Luo Shu's subordinates. Even if those people were really civilians, if Luo Shu gave the order, he will also raise the butcher knife without hesitation. Clang. Everyone is ready to fight and wipe out all those rebels. Seeing that his parents didn't speak anymore, Drake took out the four-edged axe and western sword from his waist and issued a strategic notice to the soldiers on the warship. Roar, roar. A group of naval soldiers pulled out their weapons one after another, roared and looked like they were sharpening their knives in response to Drake's order. Do you think I'm cold-blooded? At this time, Luo Shu, who was standing on the deck, asked Baccarat beside him while watching the battle on the shore. No, I think as a navy, you are right to do this. Since those civilians chose to follow the Revolutionary Army and try to overthrow the country's power, they should expect to pay a bloody price for it. Bakara shook her head calmly and replied in a light voice. Although she is young now, her thoughts are not generally mature. Maybe this is related to her own experience. As a person with no hands, a girl with strong strength can live in the relatively chaotic sea area of the North Sea for so long without anyone's help. If she relies on luck alone, it is obviously not enough. Don't mess around, everyone, detach some people to hold back the Navy. We will win soon, and those soldiers will be defeated. Yes, the elite soldiers of our Revolutionary Army are here. If there is a strong man in the Navy, he will definitely take action. With one go, defeat these soldiers, and as long as you eliminate the king and those ministers in the palace, your future lives will change from now on. Quote. On Cuts Island, several regular revolutionary troops, when they discovered that the civilians looked uneasy after seeing the Navy landing on the island, they immediately shouted loudly, directing the battle while building momentum for them. Obviously, these revolutionary troops did this kind of thing frequently, and almost instantly stabilized the restless hearts of thousands of civilians. As the commander of the Revolutionary Army, Haku chose to work with the group of civilians to hold Luoshu and others back so that they could not stop the coup. Fall all down on me. Buzz. Luoshu saw that 2,000 to 3,000 civilians, led by Haku and several revolutionary troops, were rushing towards his position, so he glared, and an undetectable and powerful aura erupted from his body. It spread out in the middle and overwhelmed the whole world. Yes, it was his mid-level overlord-colored domineering energy. Plop, plop, plop. This overbearing domineering aura, under Luoshu's precise control, caused not only those attacking him, but also the civilians who were fighting bloody battles with the soldiers of the Ku's kingdom in the distance, and were quickly falling down one by one, foaming at the mouth at the same time, as if he had been poisoned. It's domineering and domineering. In just a few breaths, apart from a small number of Kur soldiers and a group of Marines behind Luoshu, only Haku, an elite fishman warrior in the Revolutionary Army, was left on the battlefield. With his super willpower, he was not stunned by the momentum. But he knew that his revolution had failed this time, and it was a complete failure. But when this happened, he could only curse Luoshu secretly in his heart. How could this seemingly young Navy possess such powerful strength? Leave this guy to me, Drake, lead the Navy soldiers and clean up all those trash fish. Luoshu looked at Haku, who was glaring at him with disdain, and then gave an order to Drake behind him. He would not let go of those who were stunned by his domineering aura. Now that he has made this choice, you should risk your life. Even if you are killed, you can only blame your own bad luck. Yes, sir. Drake suddenly smiled cruelly, and with the Navy behind him, including Bakara, he rushed towards the civilians who had fainted on the ground but still had weapons in their hands. This was tantamount to a tiger entering a flock of sheep. Even more so. The soldiers who were lucky enough to survive in the Ku's country immediately joined in the massacre. The anger they had gathered in their hearts before had reached its extreme, and now it could finally burst out. As a Navy, you allow your subordinates to massacre civilians. Go and claim justice. Whoosh! Haku shouted angrily and rushed towards Luoshu quickly, while raising his fist. As a revolutionary soldier with a strong martial arts spirit, he hated the decisive Navy like Luoshu the most. He wanted to teach this cruel young Marine a lesson. Boom! Click! Who said they were civilians? I was just letting my men massacre the claws of the Revolutionary Army, and I suddenly thought of a very good idea. You said that if I captured you alive, and then announced that you would be publicly executed at the G20 branch, during the won't you attract those stinky rats who only dare to hide in dark corners to come and save you. Luoshu faced Haku's punch. He did not dodge. Instead, he raised his hand slightly and grabbed his fist. With a little force, Haku's arm was twisted into a twist, and Luoshu there was still a disdainful smile on his face. At the same time, he came up with a very good idea and informed the other party. Yes, he wanted to see how cohesive the Revolutionary Army was and whether it would send someone comes to save the elite captain of the Revolutionary Army in front of him. Although it is unlikely, if he can lead some revolutionary troops hiding in Beihai, Luoshu can successfully catch them all, and the achievements he can obtain by then will be limitless. You are dreaming. I won't let you succeed even if I die. Fishman Karate 3000 wa Shoken. After hearing Luoshu's words, Haku was extremely angry. He gave up on trying to break free from the completely broken arm. Instead, he slightly bowed his right arm and stood upright. In an instant, he would carry the powerful force. The right fist was punched out, pointing directly at Luo Shu's heart. Now Haku can hit 3,000 Huazhang fists, which is his limit. In the original work, his strongest can hit 4,000 Huazhang fists. Now the strength has not reached its peak yet. Boom, click, click, click it. Don't you understand the difference? You are quite tenacious as an alien, but unfortunately, your physical fitness, which you are proud to be 10 times higher than that of ordinary people, is nothing in my eyes. Just be a prisoner for me. Luo Shu stretched out his free hand again, wrapped Haku's fist, and still twisted his arm. While Haku screamed, he looked at the other party with a somewhat playful look, and said with a sneer. Arrive. With the strength of the revolutionary fishman in front of him, Luo Shu didn't even use his arrogance. He relied entirely on his fighting instincts and his extremely terrifying physique to crush the opponent. Even 100 Haku could defeat him. It's not enough for him to fight, and the difference in strength level between the two is too big. If Luo Shu had used the same punch that he used to hit Garp, he could have beaten Haku to pieces with just strength alone, even if he didn't have high-level armed color hockey. Boom, plop. Then, before Haku screamed, Luo Shu controlled his strength and slashed the opponent's neck with a knife. After a muffled sound, Haku's whole body fell to the ground motionless, and he fainted. But the moment he closed his eyes, the regret in his heart reached its extreme. He shouted more than once that he should not lead his companions in this revolution without authorization. Chapter 51. Yes, he regretted it. It seemed that I could also hear the tragic wails of the Revolutionary Army comrades who were killed one by one under the combined hands of Drake and Baccarat in the distance before they died. It's just that he felt that his head was getting heavier and heavier, and he couldn't control his body at the same time. Eventually, his eyes went dark, he could no longer hear any sound, and his whole person seemed to have entered a state of emptiness. And time passed by little by little. After less than 20 minutes, the people on the battlefield stopped what they were doing. They saw that the shore of Ku's island was several kilometers in diameter. In the area, corpses were lying on their backs everywhere, which could be described as a river of blood. I'm afraid that the land here will not turn into the same brown color as before after many years, but will always maintain this scarlet blood color. Coupled with the bloody atmosphere, the king of the Ku's kingdom is likely to be the king of Ku's after this incident. Move away from this island and rebuild a royal capital. Report, sir. All the rebels have been killed. Drake and Baccarat, who had a lot of blood on their bodies, came to Luo Shu and saluted together. They are still very excited now. Yes, when they kill a sufficient number of people, this happens all the time. Very good. Lead the soldiers back to the warship and wait for me. Remember to keep an eye on this guy and don't let him die. He is of no small use to us. Luo Shu nodded with satisfaction, then gave instructions to the two of them, and then used his fruit power to rise into the sky and fly towards the center of the island. We have won. He is worthy of being our hero in the North Sea. He turned the situation around in just a moment. If I had his strength, I would be able to better protect the country of Kuz. Stop dreaming. Rear Admiral Luo Shu is the most powerful genius in the history of the Navy. How can you compare with him? We can only say that we are lucky enough. If we continue to delay, we may be completely wiped out. Yes, these revolutionary troops actually incited the civilians of our country to fight with us, while they reaped the benefits. It's really abominable. Don't let me know who the Revolutionary Army is in the future, otherwise I will chop him to death. The fairness they talk about is just a lie to deceive the common people, which is many times greater than the threat of pirates. Quote. At this time, the soldiers of the Kuz kingdom finally let go of their tense nerves, and sat on the ground imagelessly one by one, discussing loudly while relieving their physical and mental fatigue. Most of them expressed their gratitude and admiration for Luo Shu, while a few people almost hated the Revolutionary Army to death, and even wanted to eat their flesh alive. Your Majesty the King, Major General Luo Shu has arrived outside the palace, and all those revolutionary troops and rebels have been successfully eradicated. We are safe. On the other side, a minister in charge of lookout rushed into the palace in a hurry and reported the good news to King Kuz, who was sitting on the throne. He was in a very good mood now. He didn't know the last time he was so happy. It happened years ago. Quick, please invite Major General Luo Shu to come in. Hearing this news from his subordinates, the officials and the king in the entire palace breathed a sigh of relief and let go of their hearts that had been in their throats. King Kuz even said loudly with excitement on his face, stood up from the throne at the same time, pretending to greet Luo Shu personally. He really didn't know how to thank this young naval admiral whom he had never met before, but who had saved his country. Many thanks to Major General Luo Shu for relieving the crisis in our country of Kuz. It is true that a hero comes from a young age. I would like to thank you very much. That's right, I would like to thank Major General Luo Shu this time. If Major General Luo Shu hadn't taken action, we might have all been killed by those rebellious people who cheated on us. If all the generals in the Navy were as outstanding as Major General Luo Shu, the world would have been peaceful a long time ago. How could there be any pirates or revolutionary troops who would dare to jump out? When Luo Shu just entered the hall, under the leadership of King Kuz, everyone bowed to him and started a series of compliments. Their words were all from the heart, and there was no hypocrisy involved. The king is serious. Your country of Kuz is within the waters under the jurisdiction of my G20 branch. If something happens, I, the highest officer, will of course come to the rescue. Luo Shu waved his hands and said with a serious face. That's how he is. He says whatever he says to anyone he meets. When he needs to be tough, he will never lose his temper. When he needs to be restrained, he will never be arrogant. Ha 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 ha. Good. It should be the first time for Major General Luo Shu to come to our country of Kuz, and now he is solving problems for my country. He must have a good drink no matter what. Come on, hurry up and arrange the banquet. It must be of the highest standard. King Kuz smiled so hard that he almost couldn't see his eyes. He immediately ordered several ministers to arrange delicious food. He will stay with Luo Shu until he gets drunk today. As one of the countries joining the world government, Kuz's country's wealth is also very huge, and it was impossible for a person with King Kuz's status to talk like this to a low-ranking naval admiral like Luo Shu in the past, let alone eat and drink with him. That was simply a dream. But Luo Shu is different. He is not an ordinary rear admiral. Anyone with a little bit of brains can guess what achievements he can achieve in the future. As the leader of a country, King Kuz is naturally not a fool. He has seen through it. This, coupled with Luo Shu's performance this time, of course he must seize the opportunity to establish a good friendship with Luo Shu, so that there will be only 100 benefits and no disadvantages for him in the future. Thank you very much for your kindness, King. However, I have important matters and I am unable to stay here for a long time. In half a month, I will publicly execute a captured Revolutionary Army captain at the G20 branch. At that time, I would like to ask people from the Kuz country to come and watch. Luo Shu shook his head gently, and politely declined the banquet at first, and then extended an invitation to King Kuz. Since the other party was the king, he did not ask him to go and watch the execution in person, but in order to achieve the goal for a certain purpose, the Kuz state has to send several officials there. Please rest assured, Major General Luo Shu, there will definitely be people from Kuz country participating. King Kuz, who was thinking fast, agreed directly without any hesitation. There is no need to take risks himself. He can just send a minister with some power to go there. Firstly, it will give Luo Shu enough face. Secondly, it can be regarded as an indirect relationship with him. Why wouldn't he do it? In this case, I won't bother you anymore. When Luo Shu heard that the other party had agreed to his invitation, he did not stay any longer. Instead, he turned around and left the palace. He wanted to go back and make a good plan, at least for everyone in the sea area under his jurisdiction to see it. This execution ceremony. Polu, Marshal of the Warring States period, the crisis in the Kuz kingdom has been resolved, and the revolutionary army that tried to subvert the regime was eradicated by me. I even captured the elite captain of the revolutionary army, Heku. I plan to kill him in half a month. Public execution by my G20 branch. When he returned to the warship, Luo Shu immediately took out the phone bug, reported the results of the battle to Warring States, and expressed what he was thinking. After all, the other party was also the marshal of the Navy headquarters. What he was thinking, the decision needs to be discussed with him, and it is impossible to act without authorization. Luo Shu, you have to think carefully. Now the Navy headquarters cannot send out high-end combat forces to help you. I believe that even the 5 old stars will not take this matter seriously. And if the Revolutionary Army really sends out strong men to rescue you, if so, you may be in danger. Warring States looked happy at first, but then frowned. He didn't agree with Luo Shu's proposal, but he didn't object. The most important thing was because Haku didn't seem to be a good person in the Revolutionary Army. Such an important role. If the other party is one of the 4 military commanders, then he may directly ask Luo Shu to force that person to return to Marineland, and then publicly execute him at the Navy headquarters, thus throwing a thorn in the side and letting the Revolutionary Army people fall into the trap. Marshal of the Warring States period, I don't need my headquarters to send combat forces here. I just want to propose to you. I will handle this matter personally. Please don't worry. Luo Shu said with a chuckle. From the beginning to the end, he never wanted any help from the headquarters. He also didn't expect how big a fish could be attracted by a Haku. His main purpose was to frighten the hidden fish. The Revolutionary Army in Beihai, as well as those young people, let him know his strength. Let those people try not to cause trouble in the sea areas under his jurisdiction, otherwise the end will be tragic. Just be aware of it. But don't be careless. If the Revolutionary Army does something unexpected, you must ensure the safety of your life. On the other side, Warring States said to Luo Shu with a solemn expression. He did not want to receive the news that the Revolutionary Army invaded the G20 branch and its top officer, Rear Admiral Luo Shu of the Navy headquarters, died in the battle. Otherwise, he would become angry on the spot. He became a great Buddha and once again destroyed his office. In this way, after Luo Shu reported the matter to Warring States, he began to order his men to invite the ministers of the countries in the sea area under his jurisdiction and let them meet in the middle of the sea. Months later, he came to the G20 branch to participate in the execution ceremony. He also publicized the incident throughout the Beihai. The purpose was to pass the news to the ears of the Revolutionary Army, and even added large numbers of people to some large islands in the Beihai. The purpose of the screen is to allow civilians to watch this execution at close range. Early the next morning, in an unknown sea area of the Grand Line, there is a desolate island full of yellow sand and rocks. This place is called the White Earth Island, Batergo. Although it looks very inconspicuous, this island is the headquarters of the Revolutionary Army. Buckle, leader. Something happened in Beihai. Commander Karas just reported to us that Haku was captured by Luo Shu, the top officer of the Navy G20 branch in Beihai, and will be publicly executed in more than 10 days. A middle-aged man with a bear-shaped helmet on his head, a cigarette hanging from his mouth, and a thick beard knocked on a secret door. After entering, he faced a man in a green robe with only his face exposed. The man with the mysterious tattoo said respectfully. He is the intelligence control officer of the Revolutionary Army. His name is Terry Gildio, and he is one of the first people to follow the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Monkey D. Luo Shu. I remembered, he is the young man who is known as the strongest genius in the Navy. I didn't expect that his character would be so cruel, and he would not feel any compassion for those civilians. What a cold-blooded guy. Mengqi Dilong took a piece of information from the other party. After watching it carefully for a while, he whispered with a gloomy face. Obviously, he had heard of Luo Shu's name before and received it from the other party. In the Navy, he had a big conflict with his father, but he never paid much attention to it. But this time it was different. In his eyes, Luo Shu's behavior was clearly a deliberate provocation to the Revolutionary Army. Or rather, intending to let the Revolutionary Army send people to rescue them, so that the other party could catch them all. Yes, this kid is very similar to Akainu. They are both the kind of naval generals who do whatever it takes to complete their missions. Commander Karas is extremely angry about this. If he had not taken the Navy headquarters into consideration, he would probably have sent strong men to help Luo Shu. If so, he would have already set off for the G20 branch and rescued Haku. Terry Gildio said with hatred. Since he can become a Revolutionary Army, he is more or less hostile to the Navy and the world government, let alone a decisive Navy like Luo Shu. General. The Navy will not send out strong men to help. After all, Haku's status is not considered a high-level position in our Revolutionary Army. However, this guy from warring states often does not follow common sense, so you inform Karas and tell him not to act rashly. As for the rescue, I will discuss it with him face to face when I arrive in Beihai. Call. Monkey D. Dragon, who was originally sitting there, thought carefully, stood up slowly, gave an order to Terry Gildio, and then disappeared into the dark room into a gust of wind. Even Luo Shu may not have thought that his plan would lead to Monkey D. Long, the leader of the Revolutionary Army and the most vicious criminal in the world. At the same time, it also showed that he underestimated the value of Haku, or the bond between the revolutionary armies. In fact, the Revolutionary Army is not as compact as it seems. If Haku had not taught many people to practice Murloc karate and made great contributions to the Revolutionary Army, Monkey D. Dragon would not have been able to rescue the opponent. As the commander of the Northern Army, Karas would not be angry because of this. This is a real world after all, and some people or things are naturally different from those in the original work. Luo Shu is fully aware of this, but even if he knows Monkey D. Dragon's plan, he will not be afraid, but may be very excited. Yes, it was exciting. Apart from fighting against the two top powerhouses, Zephyr and Garp, Luo Shu had never encountered an opponent whose strength was comparable to these two. Even Edward Wabel was not as strong as him. There is a big gap. The most important thing is that he and the former can only be regarded as a discussion, not a life and death battle. Otherwise, the end of a battle will bring him a lot of insights, allowing him to quickly become stronger. The hero of the North Sea, an interesting young man. He is only 20 years old and has such strength. The Navy is really full of talents. Moreover, the sea area under its jurisdiction is so peaceful. It seems that my choice this time is right. At the same time, a middle-aged man in his 40s wearing a purple baggy kimono was riding on a small boat. His eyes were completely destroyed, and two clearly visible scars formed a cross shape. It runs from his forehead to his cheek. Obviously, these two scars are the culprits that caused his blindness. In the original book, he joined the Navy after the war and became the Admiral of the Navy headquarters. Now he is not as good as Fujitora. Title. Just a few days ago, he heard the name Luo Shu many times from the ears of civilians. Until today, when he learned that Luo Shu was going to publicly execute a revolutionary soldier at the Navy G20 branch, he immediately set out to prepare go, firstly, to get to know Luo Shu up close, and secondly, after thinking that the Revolutionary Army is likely to go to the rescue and that he can help the other party then. This is also because Luo Shu has been criticized for his actions after taking office. A smile, the recognition of this top powerhouse hiding in Beihai. Otherwise, he would not have had time to go and watch the execution. At that time, he would rather stay in the casino and vent his gambling addiction. Another day passed. On the school grounds of the Navy G20 branch, a large group of Navy soldiers wearing sailor uniforms were gathering together to practice, while Drake and Thor were commanding some Marines and building a tall execution platform. After all, this was a public execution. But to be carried out under the eyes of most people living in Beihai, they naturally have to make preparations. At least, they must look very majestic on the surface. As for those soldiers, they are in order to cope with the situation more than 10 days later. The war that is very likely to happen, adhering to the concept of sharpening one's weapons in battle, displeasure will be disastrous, and is training tirelessly. Crack, crackle. At this time, Luo Shu was in the training room he had carefully built. He saw that his whole body was covered with dazzling thunder and lightning. He was polishing his body over and over again, while making plans to further develop the ability of the thunder fruit. At present, in addition to developing several large-scale group attacks, he has also combined the ability of the thunder fruit with his own physical skills to create several extremely practical and destructive moves. It can be said that he only used within a few months, the thunder fruit was developed. It is much stronger than Enel in the original work. This is the difference in talent. Report, sir, there is a person named Yishao who wants to see you and claims to be able to help you. Until noon, after Luo Shu came out of the practice room and was about to go to the restaurant to eat, Derek ran up to him and said with a somewhat embarrassed look. It turned out that Yishao expressed his thoughts when he arrived at the G20 branch. After the Navy soldier informed him, Drake immediately became interested and wanted to meet this guy who dared to speak wildly. But when he saw Yishao, he found that he could not see through this person's strength at all, and the powerful aura that the other person exuded from time to time actually made him feel extremely dangerous, so he did not dare to neglect and hurriedly asked Luo report this matter. A smile. Interesting. Take him to the restaurant to meet me. You don't have to be like this. His strength is comparable to the top combat power of the Navy headquarters, but he has always been secretive. If you practice hard, you may be able to reach that level. Luo Shu was stunned for a moment, then ordered to Derek, and did not forget to encourage him. He knew the strength of Yi Xiao very well. It is no exaggeration to say that the opponent's current strength is absolutely no weaker than Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru. In some aspects, they are even better. Yes, sir. Drake saluted Luo Shu and quickly regained his former self-confidence. He believed that sooner or later, he would be able to improve his strength to a level comparable to that of a general, and then he would be able to better help his parents. Meeting Major General Luo Shu for the first time. I'm here uninvited, I hope you don't mind. 10 minutes later, Yi Xiao, led by Drake, arrived at a luxurious restaurant. Drake left wisely, leaving space for Yi Xiao and Luo Shu. Your Majesty, this is serious, but Beihai is a crouching tiger, hidden dragon, and there are actually strong people like you living here. This really surprised me. Luo Shu carefully looked at the middle-aged man in front of him, and then said in a faint surprise. He has now determined that the person in front of him is Fujitora in the original work, but he looks much younger now than he will in the future. The aura on his body is also stronger. Where, Major General Luo Shu is the one I admire the most. I originally thought that this execution could help you, but after seeing you, I thought too much. Yi Xiao quickly shook his head and said very humbly that this is just the way he is. Even when facing enemies, he never uses swear words. Instead, he uses honorifics. System. Open the other party's panel. Ding. The panel is opening. Name. Yi Xiao. Special talent. Super perception. Domineering. Top knowledge color, advanced armament color. Physical skill, advanced. Sword skill, intermediate great swordsman. Ability, superhuman series, heavy fruit awakened. Comprehensive strength, SSS+. Then I would like to thank you for your kindness. If you don't mind, please sit down and have dinner together. Let's talk while eating. Looking at Yi Xiao's panel, Luo Shu smiled and invited him, but he was thinking in his heart that Yi Xiao is really powerful. He is worthy of being called a powerful and terrifying monster in the original work. Of course I'm very happy, Yi Xiao said. He straightened his collar first, then took off the staff and knife from his waist, put it on a chair aside, and then sat directly opposite Luo Shu. Have you ever thought about becoming a navy? This way you have a better chance of fulfilling your long-cherished wish. After half an hour, when there were only a few small piles of food left on the huge dining table, the two of them stopped what they were doing. They were both strong men and had huge appetites. It was not an ordinary surprise. After Luo Shu wiped the oil stains on the corner of his mouth with a handkerchief, he suddenly asked Yi Xiao. During the meal just now, he had a simple chat with Yi Xiao for a while, and they got to know each other in advance. But however, he did not agree with Yi Xiao's way of doing things. The other party's kindness was very similar to that of Garp, who had a grudge against him. If Yi Xiao had faced the civilians in Ku's country who had been brainwashed by the Revolutionary Army, he would have it as very likely that they will not make a move and do some hesitant things. In the original work, the Straw Hat Pirates are madly released. No, they are released to the sea. The reason is actually that Yi Xiao feels that the other party is a kind-hearted pirate group, except for the other party. Apart from his character, Luo Shu is quite satisfied with Yi Xiao. Especially the powerful heavy fruit, which is definitely the top ability in the superhuman system. Combined with the excellent swordsmanship and domineering, Yi Xiao can also fight against others alone. Or being besieged, they appear to be at ease. To be honest, Major General Luo Shu, I do have the idea of joining the Navy, but it's not the time yet. Yi Xiao smiled wryly and shook his head and said that the reason why he refused was for two reasons. One was that he was not young anymore. If he joined the Navy and had to slowly climb up from the bottom, he would probably not become a when he becomes a general, he will grow old. At that time, he will not have the opportunity to display his ambitions. Secondly, there is the king of the Kibukai. He has never understood why the world government found those pirates to support its appearance. Although they talk about using thieves to punish thieves, they do not restrict the development of those scum, and they also help them do evil, turning a blind eye to them and closing one eye. What left him speechless the most was the policy that legalized robbery, which meant that all members of the Shichibukai were free to invade any country or small town. How many civilians would have their families destroyed because of this? Are you afraid that you don't want to start from the bottom? Are you ready to become a lieutenant general or even a general in the Navy headquarters? I have to say that your idea is very good, but for now, this kind of thing is impossible to happen. Unless the Navy suffers heavy losses. But with all due respect, as long as I, Luo Shu, stay in the Navy, that situation will never happen. No one in this world has the strength to shake the foundation of the Navy. Luo Shu put down his handkerchief. He said with a serious face, he was not arrogant, but this is the fact. In the original book, after the war, the Navy recruited soldiers from all over the world, and promoted Fujitora and Green Bull to become Navy General of the headquarters. The reason is that Sengoku and Garp retreated to the second line, and Aokiji left the Navy after being defeated by Akainu. As a result, the Navy camp suddenly lost 3 top powerhouses, and only then did the subsequent events occur. With Shiro, the bearded pirate's invasion of the Navy headquarters had nothing to do with it. Besides killing and wounding some soldiers, Whitebeard only killed a few lieutenants in seconds. The Navy suffered no losses at all. At most, Whitebeard was dying. The words I said before had some effect. If the 3 generals, Garp, Sengoku, and Suru had taken full action at that time, no one in the Whitebeard pirates would have left the Navy headquarters alive, and even Edward Newgate would not have been able to leave the Navy headquarters alive. I didn't even have a chance to say my last words. Even if the red-haired pirates were added later, it wouldn't have any effect. Shanks just calculated that the Navy would not have another war with him, so he uttered these wild words to save face. Do you really think that the 4 emperors are invincible? It is no exaggeration to say that without 3 or more 4 emperors gathered together, they cannot cause catastrophe to the Navy. This does not include whether the world government sends strong people to help. Under the premise. In this world, anyone who dares to underestimate the power of the Navy is almost an idiot. The reason why the 4 emperors are not touched is just because there is no room for them, or if they hit one, they are likely to be attacked by others. The 4 emperors, sneak attack, after all, the 2 camps of the Navy and pirates are natural enemies. If the losses are too great, how can we suppress other pirates in the world? Wouldn't the whole world be plunged into turmoil? And the clever Sengoku, of course he would not do that, otherwise he would become a sinner in history. Quote. Yi Xiao didn't say anything, he just opened his white eyes and stared straight at Luo Shu. Although he couldn't see anything, he could feel the strong confidence in Luo Shu's words, as if he was narrating a fact. Same. I can see that you have your own justice in your heart. If you join the Navy one day, I don't want you to become the kind of general who can't tell right from wrong. There are many people in this world who admire pirates and regard the Pirate King as their goal. This means that the Navy will never be able to catch all pirates. If you really want to help those civilians and prevent them from living in dire straits every day, you must start from go ahead and solve the problem. As for the King's Shichibukai, when I have a certain amount of power in my hands, I will naturally find a way to get rid of those impurities. This is my promise as a strong man. Luo Shu stood up from his seat, looked straight into his eyes and smiled, speaking word by word, and the domineering aura in his body also slightly emanated at this moment. He said so much, and his purpose was nothing more than it's about subduing a smile, but the other person is not an ordinary person, and it is impossible to be tempted, so we can only change the method and do it step by step, so as to have a chance. Overlord and domineering, what you said makes sense. If you really do it to abolish the King's Shichibukai, then I will smile and obey you from that day on. After Yi Xiao murmured something in his heart, he solemnly said to Luo Shu that there was no way. Luo Shu's words really touched him, because he had been thinking about how to better protect civilians and how to completely abolish it. The Kibui system. This is his lifelong expectation. If Luo Shu really completes it for him, he will definitely fulfill his promise. Although he found that Luo Shu has great ambitions, he doesn't mind, as long as Luo Shu it's impossible for him to leave without becoming that kind of extremely cruel person. More than 10 days have passed, and Yi Xiao has never left the G20 branch. In addition to practicing every day, she talks about some things with Luo Shu, and is often touched by Luo Shu's words. After all, Yi Xiao has been living in seclusion in Beihai for some years. He rarely meets masters that he can face seriously, let alone the opponents who are from the Navy camp. Now that he has the opportunity, he always shows that he has many topics to talk about. On this day, at the port of the Beihai G20 branch that Luo Shu was in charge of, there were a variety of ships docked, the number of which exceeded the number of warships. They all came from large and small countries in this sea area, or some villages and towns. Big shot. The first purpose is to observe Luo Shu, the hero of the North Sea, at close range, and the second purpose is to establish a good relationship with the other party, which will help Luo Shu to come to the rescue as soon as possible when encountering emergencies in the future. Look, there's a picture soon. Wow, so spectacular. These navies look very powerful. If the Revolutionary Army really dares to go to the rescue, they will definitely go there and never come back. Of course, with Major General Luo Shu, the hero of the North Sea, sitting in charge, what a bullshit revolutionary army, they are basically chickens and dogs, vulnerable to a single blow. Major General Luo Shu is so charming. If I could have a man like this, I would be willing to die. Stop dreaming and look at what you look like. Are you worthy of Major General Luo Shu? I really hope that someone from the Revolutionary Army will go to rescue his comrades, so that Major General Luo Shu can catch them all. From now on, Beihai will no longer have to worry about the Revolutionary Army causing trouble. It wasn't until 9 o'clock in the morning that the screens on several large islands in the North Sea suddenly showed pictures. This made the civilians who had been waiting for a long time and some pirates among them suddenly look at each other. Liang, at the same time, was also shocked by the sight of the Navy G20 branch. A few pirates among them began to have numb feet and unnatural trembling of their bodies. They swore that they would never appear in the waters under Luo Shu's jurisdiction again. Otherwise, I am afraid that my life will not be saved. And Gaji, the patriarch of the Vinsmoke family, also took his 3 sons and daughters, hid on an island, and watched silently on the big screen. They expressed their reaction to this public execution of the elite Revolutionary Army. They were also very interested in the captain's matter, and since it happened in Beihai, they would not miss it. If it weren't for some conflicts with Luo Shu, Gaoji would have thought of going to the G20 branch to have a personal visit, but this idea cannot be realized at all. This is the man who is called the hero of the North Sea. He is so domineering. Reiju, who was standing behind Gaji, stared at the screen, where Luo Shu stood on the tall execution platform, and thought secretly in her heart. In addition to several large islands in the North Sea, there is another. The execution ceremony can also be seen in the Navy Headquarters Marshal's office. At this time, 6 people including Marinafando, Sengoku, Garp, Crane, Zephyr, Aoki, and Peach Rabbit are gathered together to watch. The scene on the screen is naturally that of the G20 branch. This guy really has his skills. It was a bit rash to make such a decision. If the Revolutionary Army really sends a few strong men to rescue him, even if he is amazingly powerful, he may not be able to stop him. With the help of Thor and Drake alone, I am afraid it will be difficult to reverse the situation of the war. After all, they are too young after all. Zephyr sighed with a somewhat ugly expression. He is indeed worried about Luo Shu's safety now, but more of it is a blessing. He hopes that under the auspices of Luo Shu, this execution will end successfully. Have you noticed the blind swordsman standing behind Luo Shu? He actually gave me a dangerous aura. Taotu, who was next to he, said with a solemn expression. She also raised her jade hand and pointed at the smile on the screen. He always felt that this blind man was very unusual. It was the blind swordsman Yi Xiao from Beihai, a superman with multiple fruit abilities. He was very strong. The world government once sent someone to invite him, but he was rejected. At this time, he, who was standing aside, explained that it was obvious that the Navy's intelligence contained information about Yi Xiao. If something goes wrong, the people responsible for intelligence should be shot on the spot. Oh, it turned out to be him. There has been no news about this person for a long time. It seems that he is still in Beihai, but now he has appeared in the G20 branch, and it seems that he is here to help Luo Shu. After listening to his words, Warring States said with some surprise. From Yi Xiao's position, He could tell that if the Navy was in a critical moment, the other party would definitely come to help. This made his originally agitated mood feel much relieved for a while. As for Garp, who was sitting there, he said nothing and acted as if he didn't care, but his eyes never left the screen. He was a little nervous now, because he didn't know the one that made him the extremely sad son, Monkey D. Dragon, will go to rescue his men in a hot-headed manner. At the beginning, he was not too worried. In his opinion, even if his son showed up, with the strength of Luo Shu, Drake, and Thor, he would not be able to keep each other at all, or even be blinded. Chi Dilong still has a high chance of rescuing the revolutionary soldier. But now he doesn't think so. He has also heard of Yishao. He is very powerful. He was called a monster many years ago. If Monkey D. Dragon is held back by the opponent, he will be attacked by Luo Shu and others. A sneak attack would be dangerous. Regardless of how he showed it, he ignored Monkey D. Dragon and even claimed to hate him very much, but in the end, he was his biological son, so it was impossible to watch him fall. Think about Ace in the original work. After being killed by Akainu, Garp was so angry that he wanted to fight Akainu, but the other party had no blood relationship with him, so it can be seen from this that Garp's character, if his immediate family members were harmed, the consequences would be tragic. Let alone the Warring States period, even if Zephyr is added, it may not be able to stop the furious Garp. And Aokiji, like Garp, doesn't care on the surface, but his peripheral vision is always looking at the screen, not wanting to miss any of the plot. Get the phone bug. May I have your name? With an hour left before the execution, Luo Shu from the G20 branch stood on the tall execution platform, took the loudspeaker phone bug handed to him by a Navy soldier, put it in the palm of his hand, and turned his gaze to, with his shoulder blades and leg bones broken, Haku, who was kneeling there, asked loudly. Navy, your plan will never succeed. My compatriots in the Revolutionary Army, you must not come to rescue us. Plop. Haku, who had been tortured, glanced at Sol Shu with his eyes viciously, and then yelled at the loudspeaker phone in Luo Shu's hand. He is now a dying person, so naturally he will no longer have any fear. Mentality, but before he could finish his roar, Luo Shu stepped on his head, causing his face to touch the ground and leaving him speechless. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not resist that powerful force. This fish man is called Haku. As for his identity, everyone must know it. Yes, he is an elite member of the Revolutionary Army. Just a dozen days ago, he led several revolutionary troops to sneak into the Q's kingdom and began to brainwash the civilians, with the purpose of usurping the power of the Q's kingdom. Although they lost that battle, more than 10,000 Q's citizens died as a result, most of whom were civilians. This shows how evil, selfish, and cold-blooded the Revolutionary Army is. If you leave this person alone, you can imagine how many innocent people will be deceived by him in the future and lose their lives. Therefore, it is of great significance to publicly execute him at the G20 branch today, even if it means an all-out war with the Revolutionary Army. As long as I, Luo Shu, am here for a day, I will not allow these stinky fish and shrimps to pollute the North Sea. Luo Shu stepped on Haku's head while giving an enthusiastic speech. The Navy will win. Long live Major General Luo Shu. The Navy will win. Long live Major General Luo Shu. Roar, roar. Led by Drake and Thor under the execution platform, all the Navy gathered in the G20 branch, as well as the big shots coming from all over the country, all shouted loudly for a while. They really admired Luo Shu from the bottom of their hearts. The Marines all showed a look of resignation, without the slightest fear on their faces. This was exactly the effect caused by Luo Shu's words. Even the man standing behind Luo Shu couldn't help but look sideways with a smile. Once upon a time, he couldn't remember how many years he hadn't seen such a scene. A general who can be recognized by all the navies under his command cannot be selected even in the Navy headquarters. As for Haku, who was trampled under his feet, he was now gnashing his teeth in anger, and even blood began to flow from the corners of his mouth. This was not because he was hurt, but because he was angry with Luo Shu. How could he have thought that the other party would be so shameless, throwing all the dirty things on the heads of the Revolutionary Army, and then building his own greatness? If Luo Shu knew Haku's thoughts, he would only smile disdainfully. Doesn't he know that the winner of this world can modify history at will? World government is a great example. As for Luo Shu, He wants to be the real king of this world in the future, so it should be understandable if he does some shameless things now, right? Call. Boom, boom. At this moment, a gust of wind passed by, the sky began to darken, thunder could not be heard, and even the sea water at the port was constantly surging. It looked like the end was coming. Some weak navies, and even felt difficulty breathing. A depressive atmosphere was quickly spreading in the G20 branch. How terrifying. What the hell kind of weather is this? Could it be that Major General Luo Shu is unlucky and a tsunami is going to hit the G20 branch? Someone must be deliberately causing trouble, but the person who can create such weather in an instant is absolutely powerful. Major General Luo Shu may be in trouble. Shut up. Major General Luo Shu is so powerful, will he be defeated by strong winds and tsunamis? People from the Revolutionary Army must have come to the rescue. We just have to watch how Major General Luo Shu destroys them. No need to worry at all. The civilians who saw this scene on the screen, including many smart people, most guessed that this was a weather deliberately created by someone in order to interfere with this execution, but they were very fond of Luo Shu. Confidence, not believing that he would be defeated by the Revolutionary Army. At this moment, Garp, who was at the Navy headquarters, froze there. Even though others focused on him, he did not make any move, just staring at the screen. Others present understood the ability on the screen. As a father, of course he understood better. He thought that he had given this devil fruit to his son with his own hands. Although he has always wanted Meng Qidilong to become a strong man in pure physical skills, but there is a saying that it is better to be better than the blue. After Meng Qidilong showed his strong training talent, he just practiced physical skills. It was such a waste of materials, and in the end he still became a devil fruit user, and his fruit ability is not weaker than the three generals. The natural type wind fruit is also a top existence in the natural type. For its strength the bonus is very impressive. However, Garp is not in the mood to think about this at all now, but is worried about Monkey D. Dragon. The thing he least wanted to see happened, how he didn't want his son to go risk yourself and break into the G20 branch of the Navy. This place has long been called an iron-walled place. Let me loose. Crackle. After discovering that someone in the Navy was already agitated, Luo Shu immediately stepped forward. He raised his right hand, and thunder and lightning condensed in his palm, then compressed into a thunder ball and threw it into the sky. Boom. When the attack just touched the dark clouds, it exploded instantly. The white light reaching into the sky was very dazzling, but the effect was particularly good. After a few breaths, in addition to the strong wind that had been blowing, the G20 branch it has returned to its original appearance, and there is no longer a dark cloud in the sky. Wow! The people present immediately shouted. Obviously, they were shocked by Luo Shu's hand, and some people who didn't understand Luo Shu's fruit ability also remembered this scene tightly in their hearts. Let me see if, with my current SSS strength, I can defeat you, the most vicious criminal in the world, Monkey D. Dragon. At this time, Luo Shu narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the sky in the distance. His domineering knowledge had captured the movement there, so he also knew that the person who caused that kind of weather before was a member of the Revolutionary Army. Leader Monkey D. Dragon. Now his eyes are full of fighting spirit. Since he once again developed the ability of the Thunder Fruit one day ago, his overall strength has transformed into SSS. He is only one step away from the top of the world. He wants to try to see if you can defeat the coming powerful opponent with your own strength and that terrifying special talent. Buzz. Plop. 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 Just when Luo Shu was ready to fight Monkey D. Dragon, the opponent did not play according to common sense. Just before he appeared, he suddenly displayed his overlord-like domineering energy. This caused the naval soldiers present to react one after another, fell down. It's a high-end domineering color. Although Luo Shu also controlled his own overlord-colored domineering force to compete with him, the effect was not that obvious. He could only lower the opponent's overlord-colored domineering level. But even so, some weak-minded naval soldiers will also faint due to this. In the original work, when the overlord-colored domineering energy is in conflict, red thunder and lightning will be produced, and even the sky will split due to this, but there must be a premise, that is, the two overlord-colored domineering levels are similar. When this happens, otherwise the weaker party can only play a restrictive role at most. Just like Whitebeard and Shanks on the Moby Dick, They are both high-level Overlord color hockey possessors, although Shank's Overlord color even better, but did not directly crush Whitebeard, so the scene at that time appeared. Once it reaches the top level, it will derive the Overlord territory, which is a kind of territory that is currently recorded. Only the dead pirate King Galdi at the level Roger has reached. His abilities are extremely terrifying, especially on the sea. Call. Soon, the strong wind whistling in the G20 branch suddenly stopped, and two figures suddenly appeared at the port. One of them was wearing a dark green robe, which wrapped the whole person tightly, only revealing a face with tattoos. A tall and burly man with a beak-like loudspeaker and a bald man wearing a black feather coat was slowly walking towards the execution platform. Around them, people were lying on the ground. Navy soldier. System, open the other party's panel. Ding. The panel is opening. Name, Monkey D. Dragon. Special talents, Natural Overlord, Super Brutal Strength, Super Mind. Dominance, Advanced Overlord Color, Top Armed Color, Advanced Insight Color. Physical Skills, Top Sword Skills. Beginner Ability, Natural System, Comprehensive Strength of Fengfeng Fruit, SSS+. What a powerful talent. The descendants of this old guy Garp are really perverted. Looking at Monkey D. Dragon's panel, Luo Shu couldn't help but curse secretly in his heart. He even felt that Dragon might be a little stronger than the three generals. First of all, the top-level armed color domineering was too restrained against those with natural abilities. Well, secondly, the opponent's physical skills are comparable to Akainu's, both top-notch, but he is also a natural fruit ability user. In addition, he has high-level Overlord colored hockey, which will more or less interfere with the enemy when fighting against him. If Monkey D. Dragon and any of the three generals were thrown on a desert island, and if they escaped, they would be considered losers. The final winner would definitely be Monkey D. Dragon. Everyone disperse. Drake, Thor, and Baccarat protect the safety of those people. These two guys are not something you can deal with. Finding that the dragon was getting closer and closer to the execution platform, Luo Shu immediately ordered the sailors who had not fainted to disperse and not come forward to make meaningless sacrifices. At the same time, he ordered his three subordinates to protect those who came to watch the execution. Even now, Luo Shu is still not panicking at all. Even if the Monkey D. Dragon appeared during the period, making their navy camp look very embarrassed, but in this world, the outcome of a war depends on in the battle between the top strong men. No matter how many weaklings there are, it is difficult to change the situation of the battle. Yes, sir. For a moment, the navy who had not fainted regained their confidence. After running to a distance, they stood there, waiting for the battle to begin. The people who came here to watch the execution were also led by Luo Shu's three men. They arrived at a building so that they could not be affected by the battle. In the entire school grounds and execution platform, only Luo Shu, Yi Xiao, and Monkey D. Long, the leader of the Revolutionary Army and the commander of the Northern Army, were walking towards here. Karas. Then there was a naval soldier with a long sword in his hand, and Haku who was kneeling there, looking like he was crying with gratitude. Because this soldier was standing next to Luo Shu, he was not affected by the Overlord domineering aura. Otherwise, he won't be much better. You are very different from the Navy's strongest geniuses described in the news. In other words, you shouldn't be a Navy at all. Let my companion go. I'll keep you safe. Otherwise, if you're embarrassed in front of so many people in Beihai, I'm afraid you may not be able to hang out here in the future. Until about 100 meters away from the execution platform, Meng Qi Di Long stopped. He raised his head and looked at Luo Shu, and said in a deep voice, not loud, but very powerful, as if narrating a real event. Leader of the Revolutionary Army, Meng Qi Di Long, I don't know where you got your confidence. Since you dared to come in person today, I admire your courage in every aspect. But unfortunately, your companions can only rely on you. I went to rescue him. It is absolutely impossible for me to let him go. Correct. I have another question. Your father, Monkey D. Garp, and I are old acquaintances. Do you think that if I capture you alive, will the old guy explode in anger? Ha 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 ha. It's ridiculous to say that a naval hero's son is actually the most vicious criminal in the world. It's really ridiculous. Luo Shu crossed his arms and looked at Monkey D. Dragon condescendingly. He spoke loudly to him, and finally laughed wildly. As for Karas next to him, he was ignored by him, because Luo Shu never I didn't take it seriously from beginning to end. What? The biological son of naval hero Monkey D. Garp is actually the leader of the Revolutionary Army. What a joke. It must be true. This was said by Major General Luo Shu himself. It is really unimaginable. If this is true, how did Garp become a naval hero? He doesn't deserve that title at all. That's right. So what if he has made a lot of contributions to the Navy? His son is the most vicious criminal in the world. Doesn't the world government care about this? However, because the film and television phone bug was not affected by the overlord domineering force, Luo Shu's words spread out, which caused the civilians watching the big screen to explode and discuss the Monkey D card crazily. Pooh. Only a small number of people felt that Garp had no responsibility, but most people believed that Garp did not deserve the title of naval hero and suggested that the top brass of the Navy and the world government should punish him. Yes, this was what Luo Shu did deliberately. He just wants to think about Garp and his son being against him, and he is itching with hatred. The opportunity before him is so good now, how could he miss it? Of course, he must fight back fiercely, so that Garp, who is at the Navy headquarters, learned a lesson. He was sure that it wouldn't be long before Garp would be temporarily forced to retreat to the second line because of today's incident. Anyway, it would be the same with or without him. In the original book, apart from being crazy about things, wrangling, and beating up Ponyboy apart from boxing, when Ace died, he was most outstanding when he looked like he was going to kill a Kainu who was in the same camp. I applied for a vacation and went back to Donghai to see my grandson. During the Warring States period, I left first. Sure enough, Garp, who was at the Navy headquarters, clenched his fists and finally turned into a helpless sigh. He was very self-aware and knew that he would be at the forefront of the storm in the near future. The best choice was to take a vacation and not go. Ask about the Navy. As for Luo Shu, he doesn't hate him at all. At most, he just lost to that young and ambitious guy once. It's no big deal. He will find an opportunity to move back in the future. Sang Guo, who is sitting in the main seat, nodded with a plain expression. In fact, he hoped in his heart that Garp would leave. After all, the conflict between the other party and Luo Shu could not be resolved. The two were incompatible, and of course the Navy needed Luo Shu, who was very young and powerful. A rising star who is extremely talented and powerful. This is the reality. As the saying goes, the waves from behind push the waves ahead, and new people replace old ones. No matter how brilliant the opponent has been, they will eventually have to obey the old. Even now, Garp is still at the peak of his strength, but after decades, what about the future? I'm afraid it's already old-fashioned, right? Whether you can lift your arms or legs is a problem, and you won't even live to that age. Of course, the reason why Garp can behave like this is because he is older and has extensive experience, and he no longer cares about many things. If someone had dared to provoke him so deliberately a few decades ago, he would never have been able to resist fighting the opponent even if they were in the same Navy camp. He has always had this kind of character. It's just that he doesn't value his title as a naval hero so much now. Even if someone questions it, he won't explain it, or in other words, those people are not qualified to ask him to explain it. He originally wanted his sons and grandsons to become Navy, but the reality is very harsh. Not only did he not succeed, but he was also very disappointed. But not everyone in this world will sympathize with you, and there is no such thing as fairness and justice. What your family has done, it is perfectly normal for you to be affected by something like this. Little did they know that in the O'Hara incident, due to those scholars' crazy attempts to commit suicide, civilians on the entire island were massacred. Compared with this kind of thing, Garp is relatively lucky. You should never bring the topic to his old man. Everyone is responsible for their own words, and you will pay a heavy price. Monkey D. Long said with a gloomy face at this time and gritted his teeth. He did not expect that Luo Shu would bring the topic to Garp. In addition, it would affect the transmission of the phone bug. He guessed that Beihai was watching this scene at this time. Commoners, or pirates, what kind of faces are they? This made him, Garp's biological son, so angry that he even gave birth to the person in front of him. Even if I have to face the anger of the Navy and the world government, I will not hesitate to lose my mind. Otherwise, Luo Shu may become the biggest obstacle to his revolutionary road. That guy with the beak will be left to you, life or death. As for Monkey D. Dragon, let me meet you. See how much of your father's skills you have. Luo Shu smiled disdainfully and said to Yixiao without looking back. Anyway, the other party is here to help him. He doesn't need to use it in vain. He will hand over the weaker Northern Army commander, whose strength is about SS, to Yixiao. It's quite reassuring. As for the leader of the Revolutionary Army, he plans to leave it to himself to deal with, which will help him improve his strength in the future. Major General Luo Shu, please rest assured. I will definitely try my best. Yixiao nodded lightly, opened his white eyes, looked at Kara's, then turned into a purple afterimage and rushed towards him. Since the purpose of coming here is to help Luo Shu, then in addition, in the past half-month, the relationship with him has become much closer. No matter from any aspect, I will take action with a smile. Remember to check the time. Don't delay the execution mission, your work is important. Luo Shu glanced at the naval soldier who was still standing there, maintaining the posture of about to execute Haku, and said something solemn to him, and then, without waiting for the other party to reply, he disappeared on the execution platform. Thunder Battle Axe. When he reappeared, he was already in the sky above Monkey D. Dragon. The leg wrapped with high-level armed domineering energy and accompanied by thunder and lightning was like a sharp blade, slashing down hard. This move was his move. The Thunder Fruit ability is combined with Taijutsu, giving full play to the speed bonus brought by the Thunder Fruit, and its own terrifying power, which is somewhat like the ninja taijutsu of the fourth Raikage in Naruto, Yilei Shen the Raging Thunder Axe. But if you want to compare the power, it is even better. The Raikage is completely inferior to him. Hurricane Blade. Monkey D. Dragon, who possesses advanced knowledge and color domineering, can naturally predict Luo Shu's movements. He did not dare to neglect and immediately used his Devil Fruit ability. A blue wind sword appeared in his hand instantly, thus fighting. Withstood Luo Shu's attack from the sky. Boom. But because Luo Shu's power was too great, even though Meng Qi Dilong chose to resist, he couldn't free his hands to fight back. The moment the two collided, the hard ground cracked quickly and began to sink, and the dust began to fall. As it flew up, the battle really started at this moment. Another battlefield was also quite eye-catching. Karaz, the commander of the Northern Army of the Revolutionary Army, was directly at a disadvantage after fighting Yixiao. They can only be forced to resist and have no ability to fight back. There is still a big gap in strength between the two of them. If in another 7 or 8 years, when the plot begins, Karaz's strength has grown to its peak, he may be able to compete with Yixiao try to contend, but now, even 2 or 3 of them are not enough to fight with a smile. This is his strength. He is really powerful. Only this kind of man is worthy of my following. Maybe I can try. Baccarat, what are you thinking about? As his subordinate, shouldn't you be worried about him? On the building in the distance, Baccarat stared closely at Luo Shu who was fighting with Monkey D. Dragon. Her eyes looked a little strange, and she had many strange thoughts in her heart. Looking at that mighty and domineering figure, she always felt fascinated. Sometimes, a man who is excellent in all aspects can indeed arouse a woman's curiosity, but if he is too excellent, it will make her that woman is obsessed with him. Baccarat is a perfect example. From the beginning she was only interested in Luo Shu, to now she occasionally becomes obsessed with him. This period did not last long, but it made her feel that Luo Shu was an extremely reliable man, and she would be very happy if she became his woman. As for Thor, Drake, and the Navy soldiers, they all looked at Luo Shu with admiration and awe. A strong man would attract attention no matter where he was, let alone perform in front of his own men. Then the response will be greater. Ha 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 ha, it's a very good natural devil fruit, but it's only good. If you only have this level, you can't even break through my defense. After a few minutes, the two people who were beaten to pieces in the school field were gradually separated, so that people watching the screen could clearly see their figures. Unlike before, they could only see afterimages at most. And Luo Shu, whose clothes were ruined and shirtless, laughed and taunted Monkey D. Dragon. He was very happy with this battle. The opponent was the strongest opponent he had ever fought, and Garp was certainly not included. Inside, the conflict he had with him at the Navy headquarters was at best a discussion. Well, you look more embarrassed. Mengqi Dilong responded with the same expression, but he secretly cursed Luo Shu as a monster in his heart. He had attacked Luo Shu's body several times before, but did not cause any substantial damage to him. Now I really doubt what kind of freak Luo Shu is. I will attack with all my strength. If I can't resist and die here, it's not my fault, Monkey D. Dragon. Thor mode. Luo Shu clenched his fists and shouted to Mengqi Di Long with excitement. Then violent thunder and lightning spewed out from his body, gradually forming an armor shape, making him appear full 4 or 5 meters high. After he suddenly opened his eyes, it turned into a bolt of lightning, bursting out at a much faster speed than before, and rushed towards the Monkey D. Dragon. If Kizaru saw this scene, he would probably have to curse in your heart. They are also of the natural system. Which one is said to be the fastest in the shining fruit? Yes, after Luo Shu entered this state, his speed has reached an incredible level, almost as far as the eye can see. He can arrive at the same time. Although it is a bit exaggerated, it is not much different, especially when the distance is not far. So fast. Boom, boom. After realizing that his domineering power of knowledge had managed to capture Luo Shu's movements, Mengqi Dilong murmured with a solemn expression, and then raised his right arm in an instant, barely blocking Luo Shu's fist, but that a huge force flew him away and smashed a building a few hundred meters away. But he himself, due to his own physique, as well as the defense of top-level armed domineering and iron blocks, plus he was natural ability users can transform into elements, so even if they are knocked away by Luo Shu, they will not be hurt at all. Hurricane of Destruction, Blade Hell. Before Luo Shu could attack again, Mengqi Dilong immediately used his fruit power to create a huge tornado, mixed with countless wind blades. For a time, both the surrounding buildings and the stones on the ground was blown to pieces. It is no exaggeration to say that even if thousands of people rushed in, there would be no possibility of survival, and the speed was also very fast. Although his natural type wind fruit has a low name, its ability is still very powerful, especially its destructiveness. It is also a top-notch existence in the natural system. This is not over yet. When the hurricane was about to sweep Luo Shu, Monkey D. Dragon directly smashed his body elementalization, perfectly integrated into it. This move is not poisonous. He is afraid that Luo Shu's monster-like body will not be able to resist it, so he elementalizes to avoid his attack, so that he can seize the opportunity and give Luo Shu's fatal blow. It can be seen from this how rich Monkey D. Dragon's combat experience is. Even Luo Shu couldn't help but frown, looking at the wind blades all over the sky. If he avoided it, the opponent would probably jumped on the execution platform and rescued his companions, but the trap he set up fell short in the end. So there was only one choice left for him, which was to rush into the hurricane and fight Monkey D. Dragon. The only thing that the opponent is afraid of is the top-level armed color hockey. Although it is only one level higher than his armed color hockey, the power is much worse. The top-level armed color hockey, first of all, can deal with the natural devil fruit ability. The elementalization of the enemy has a powerful restraining effect. Secondly, and most importantly, the domineering energy can penetrate into the enemy's body and cause damage from the inside out. But now Luo Shu has no other choice but to make a gamble, that is, try to fight with Monkey D. Dragon exchanged injuries for injuries. In Thor mode, his defense was also frighteningly high. In his opinion, he should be able to withstand the attacks of those wind blades. It was said that it was too late and it was too soon. In use after seeing and hearing Baki carefully sensed the position of Monkey D. Dragon, he immediately rushed towards the hurricane, and at the same time, he wrapped his fists, elbows, feet, knees and other important attack parts. He had gained advanced armed domineering. He was determined to fight with Monkey D. Dragon at his home court to see who could have the last laugh. On the other side, Karaz, who was fighting with Yishao, was already covered in bruises. In just a short time, he could no longer withstand Yishao's attack. He had more than 5 visible stab wounds, and the blood was flowing wildly. If it continued, he might not have a chance to grow. Major General Luo Shu actually took the initiative to enter that storm. This was really too dangerous. What do you know, if Major General Luo Shu uses his own speed to dodge, the leader of the Revolutionary Army will use it to rush to the execution platform, and then he can rescue his companions and retreat safely. This is indeed the case. Major General Luo Shu is worthy of being a hero of the North Sea. In order to complete this execution, he worked so hard that he even put his own life aside. Needless to say, if the generals of the Navy are like Major General Luo Shu, with the spirit of never retreating in the face of evil forces, then we no longer need to live in fear. On the contrary, those pirates may only be honest, hide and survive. To save your life. The civilians in Beihai started talking again after seeing Luo Shu take the initiative to enter the hurricane. They were all impressed by Luo Shu's fierceness, and they admired him even more. Some even admired him. Some young people have decided to wait until this incident is over and go to the G20 branch to be elected into the Navy. This Navy is finally doomed, he'd better die in the hands of that monkey D-Dragon. That's right, as long as he dies, we can plunder the North Sea and no one can stop us anymore. With the destructiveness of this storm, that guy is dead. There is no possibility of survival at all, we can celebrate in advance. Lita Euros confirm first. If Luo Shu is really dead, we will have a big banquet. Unlike those civilians, the pirates who watched this scene cursed Luo Shu crazily in private. They wanted from the bottom of their hearts to let the admiral who made them despair die in this battle. Otherwise they can no longer live their lives. The reason is that they cannot plunder and can only rely on fishing at sea or catching wild animals on some desert islands to maintain food and clothing. This is not the life they want, but if they dare when causing trouble in the waters under Luo Shu's jurisdiction, the mortality rate is 100%. No pirate group can survive unharmed. This iron law has spread all the pirate groups living in the North Sea in a short period of time. And the pirate group, which was hoping for a chance, all suffered a disaster, and not a single one of them survived. They were all wiped out by Thor and Drake with the Navy. The death can be said to be miserable. It seems that this kid's strength has improved again. It is worthy of being called the strongest natural devil fruit. As long as it is developed properly, it can quickly increase the strength of the Esper in a short period of time. In the Navy headquarters, in the Marshal's office, Warring States Tui fed a few chapters of documents into the goat's mouth, and at the same time let out a burst of emotion. Moreover, he had a new understanding of the natural system, thunderfruit in his heart. I used to hear that there are no rubbish devil fruits, only useless espers, but now it seems that a powerful devil fruit can indeed transform the esper. Even if it is taken by a strong person, the effect is obvious, is tantamount to adding more power to a tiger. Taotu took over the topic. She stared at the screen intently and said with some sourness. She had already made up her mind to find a powerful devil fruit for herself when she had the chance. Since she had been with Luo Shu before, after some discussion, she came up with this idea, and now, she is ready to realize it. But in this vast sea, where can she find a devil fruit that matches her? And as Luo Shu said, it is best to have a devil fruit. A top-notch phantom devil fruit. She really felt a little powerless about it. Taotu, you also want to become an esper. Unfortunately, although there are several devil fruits in the headquarters inventory, they are not very powerful. Even if you eat them, the improvement in your own strength will be minimal. But don't worry, you might be able to find a suitable one day. My own devil fruit. He heard the meaning of Taotu's words and comforted him in a low voice. Although she didn't even believe what she said in the end, she had always regarded the junior general, who was much younger than her, as her biological sister, so naturally she couldn't bear to attack her with words. I haven't seen that boy long for so many years. Judging from the strength he has shown so far, I am afraid that even I am no match for him. This guy Garp is really lucky to have a son with such a powerful talent. It is a pity that. But Zephyr fell into a reverie, and after waking up, he whispered, yes, when Meng Delong was in the Navy, he met him more than once, and even wanted to accept him as a disciple, but he was rejected by Garp and threatened to teach him himself. Now that they haven't seen each other for so many years, the opponent's strength has become so strong that even he, a former Navy general, has no confidence in defeating him. If the other party had not left the Navy, perhaps there would be 4 generals now, and the sea would be calmer. But all this can only exist in fantasy. Monkey D. Dragon is currently the leader of the Revolutionary Army and the #1 enemy of the world government. He is known as the most vicious criminal in the world. Once he is caught, he will be executed immediately. There won't be any surprises, even if it's stronger than Garp, it can't change this fact. Qingzi didn't speak, still watching the screen silently, but privately analyzing what his winning rate would be if he were to fight Monkey D. Dragon. The final conclusion is that if it were him, he would not be as reckless as Luo Shu, but would engage in guerrilla warfare with the opponent. Although this would probably allow the opponent to rescue his companions, he could ensure his own safety, or in other words, allow himself to he won't be defeated so quickly. The scene returned to the Navy G20 branch. Luo Shu was in the middle of a hurricane. At this time, his skin was covered with large and small white marks. It was obvious that these were caused by those dense wind blades. Moreover, blood began to flow from the corners of his mouth. There was nothing he could do about it. He had withstood so many attacks from the top-level weapon, and he did suffer some internal injuries in the end. We will stop updating novels on this site, move to our new site, Web Links. On the other hand, Monkey D. Dragon was not much better. He was also injured, and there was a very obvious punch mark on his abdomen, and even 2 ribs were broken. But this kind of injury is in the eyes of the top experts. It's nothing at all, and it won't affect their performance. But Kara's on the other side was in misery. Not long after he was knocked out by Yishao, he was hit in the back again by Yishao and his whole body was smashed into a broken building. As expected, he may be if you insist on not starting the execution, you will die in the hands of Yishao. Boom, boom, ha 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 ha, Monkey D. Dragon, you are nothing more than that, no one can stop this execution today. If you have any other moves, feel free to use them. I took them one by one. At this time, there were still 5 minutes left before the execution started. The 2 of them had been fighting for nearly an hour. After the storm dissipated, Luo Shu patted his chest and faced Monkey D. Dragon with an extremely crazy face. He laughed and said that he now felt that the blood in his body was starting to burn, and his fighting spirit reached its peak. Leader, please take Commander Karas away quickly. Just think that I am dead and the fire of revolution cannot be extinguished. Don't delay it because of me. Save the civilians in the world who are in suffering. Before Monkey D. Dragon could speak, Haku knelt down on the execution platform, his eyes filled with tears, and he shouted to Monkey D. Dragon with a look of remorse. The commander of the Northern Army came from the other side and showed his overlord look. The domineering force caused a large number of Luo Shu's navy soldiers to fall into coma. Haku saw a glimmer of hope. Then Monkey D. Dragon and Karas fought against Luo Shu and Yishao. After such a long time, they still failed to win. Instead, they showed signs of defeat. The original hope began to shatter and gradually turned into despair. Now he could only pray silently in his heart that the Revolutionary Army could overthrow the rule of the world government and return it to all civilians, just like Monkey D. Dragon imagined. A just and equitable world. As for his own life, he didn't care much. In his opinion, he died for the revolution. To use a saying from their forces, he died well deserved. Ah, Haku, I'm here to save you. Karas, who was knocked away by Yishao again, finally found an opportunity. With the help of the impact, he instantly flew towards the execution platform. His speed was so fast that even if Yishao reacted immediately, there was no chance to stop him. Does that insidious revolutionary army want to save his comrades? Is this execution going to be declared over? What a joke. How could Major General Luo Shu fail? They're all that blind man. Is he with the revolutionary army? How can you drive the opponent to the execution platform? If the Revolutionary Army had rescued his comrades, wouldn't the Navy have failed this time? All the civilians who saw this scene, including Sengoku and others in the Navy headquarters, couldn't help but sweat. The pirates who had prayed that Luo Shu died in the hurricane suddenly brightened their eyes. If the revolutionary soldier was killed, if Luo Shu is rescued, Luo Shu will bring shame to the Navy, and then they can vent their unhappiness. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.